Welcome into Hoopsville, everybody, and welcome back from the holidays and Happy New Year. I am your host, Dave McHugh, broadcasting from the WBCA NABC studios, thanks to D3Hoops.com. You have a plan when you start these things. You have a plan when you put them together. Those plans tend to fall apart, as we have now seen a few times this year. Plenty to talk about post-holidays on top of things going on now. Let's get through the particulars. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us, hoopsville at D3Hoops.com. Join us on Facebook, Facebook.com/Hoopsville. We're once again streaming live as well. You can also join us on Instagram. We're going to use it tonight to promote what we're doing, but we don't tend to follow along there. You can do that at Hoopsville at D3Hoops.com. There's a ton to talk about. I had plans to talk about the D3Hoops.com Classic, Ramapo, Salisbury, Hardin-Simmons, Eau Claire on the men's side. Of course, Puget Sound, Lewis and Clark on the women's side. I had planned to talk about the guests that we have coming up today that are already scheduled. All of that will be covered today, except we've got to get to the big news. Shocking developments at the start, or this afternoon. We have been waiting for the investigation into potential illegal practices by Stevens Point to come out. I had talked to those at the institution throughout the preseason, or off-season, I should say, into the preseason. Their indications were that they thought things would be wrapped up come October. October came and went, nothing. We saw Stevens Point at the Hoopsville Classic, didn't really get to talk about it. Came and went, nothing. Of course, the longer things go, the more likely you're thinking, maybe this investigation isn't as minor as the school thinks. The school is saying we have minor infractions, et cetera, et cetera. I then get a couple birds in my ear in the last few weeks saying, hey, listen, I think the NCAA has maybe made a phone call, or there's been a conference call, or I have somebody else say, hey, listen, the NCAA has made a decision, or they're maybe investigating further. There's a lot of confusion as to what's going on. Until today. We still haven't heard from the NCAA, but Stevens Point has spoken, and they have spoken loudly. Bob Semling has been suspended for the rest of the season. That is 13 games. This is coming off of a loss last night to La Crosse. His assistant, two-year assistant, Kent Dernbach, is taking over as head coach. They take on a tough squad this coming. I'm sorry, they lost to Oshkosh last night. They take on La Crosse on Saturday. They have removed themselves from the WIAC WIAC postseason tournament, which, along with that, removes them from the NCAA tournament. Granted, the team is 6-5. I think the expectations of them making the NCAA tournament were pretty slim. Granted, you win the WIAC tournament, you get in. Well, that's off the table now for the Pointers. Not sure how the conference will adjust to that. Not relevant right now. All of this being done based on this fact. The NCAA has still not come out with their investigation, but clearly the school has talked to the NCAA, or at least those who are running the investigation. And remember, those running the investigation are fellow Division III schools. There are 4 allegations that have now become apparently major violations. I will read them somewhat verbatim. Bear with me. It is on D3Hoops.com. It is alleged that during the 2011-12 through 2015-16 seasons, it's 5 seasons, the men's basketball coaching staff impermissibly directed, observed, and engaged men's basketball student athletes in athletically related activities outside the institution's declared playing seasons. That's number 1. Number 2, it's alleged in the spring semesters between 02 and 15, the men's basketball coaching staff impermissibly observed approximately 16 men's basketball prospective student athletes as they participated in the men's basketball student athletes in activities detailed in allegation number 1. That means prospective students were taking part in practices. That's a major no-no in Division III. The last 2 conventions have had rules to change some of that, to allow practices, to allow observation, to allow chances to evaluate student athletes, to cut down on recruiting, essentially. They have been overwhelmingly shut down and voted no. According to this, 16 times it happened. It's alleged that during the 11-12 through 12-15-16 or 2015-16 seasons, Bob Semling did not demonstrate that he promoted an atmosphere of compliance with the men's basketball program due to his personal involvement in the alleged violations. Lack of institutional control is coming up too, because it's alleged. Between 11-12 academic year and the fall of 2015, the scope and nature of the violations detailed in allegations 1 and 2 demonstrate that the institution violated the principle of rules compliance when it failed to adequately monitor the men's basketball program's compliance with NCAA playing and practice seasons and tryout legislation. That's some heavy wording if you understand how the NCAA works. Those are major violations. And the school has decided no WIAC this year, no NCAA tournament this year. They've decided Bob Semling is to sit for 13 games the rest of the season. But what does this all truly mean? It's a tremendously good question, and we had to get to the answer, but it's hard for us to do it. So we went and decided to talk to one person who's been covering it already. I talked to him earlier. Here's that segment. Now joined by the person I first saw report this today. It's Dale Ryman, sports director for News Channel 7 WSAW in the area of First. Dale, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it on short notice here.
No problem. Thanks.
So, listen, we've been following this, as I've said, for quite a few months. We knew the NCAA was investigating. We knew this was basically... Let me try that again. Sorry about that for the folks. We had a little bit of a technical glitch. A lot of things going on today, so we're trying to get to all the bottom of them. Bear with me here. We'll try this again, starting over. Really apologize. Here we go with Ryman. Now joined by the person I first saw report this today. It's Dale Ryman, sports director for News Channel 7 WSAW in the area of First. Dale, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it on short notice here.
No problem. Thanks.
So, listen, we've been following this, as I've said, for quite a few months. We knew the NCAA was investigating. We knew this was basically practices related, at least we were under the impression, practices related to a couple seasons ago. Stevens Point had come out initially saying it's minor infractions. We've imposed a couple practice pullbacks here. You know, we're sorry about this. It's a miscommunication. We'll figure it out once the NCAA gets back to us, and we expect that to be done by the end of September. Obviously, we are in January, and things have changed dramatically. When did you find out things had gone sideways, as it were?
First indication was at 11:11 this morning. I just, by happenstance, just checked my email on my phone. And at 11:11 was an email from the UWSP athletic department and said that there is a press conference at 12:30 for media only, and that was it. No indication of what it was about. I live 25 minutes from the station. My station is 35 minutes away from UWSP Stevens Point. So you can imagine the time frame going through my head. I'm like, okay, this is not enough warning for anything.
Yeah.
So I made a couple of phone calls, and I called the SID and tried to get some type of indication, because obviously the first thought is, it has to do with those quote-unquote minor infractions that we did the obligatory story about and didn't think anything beyond it because nothing else was made a big deal. And he said that can't really tell you anything. So I said, okay, and I feel like I could say this now because he didn't accept my off-the-record invitation. I said, well, Tim, off the record, can you tell me, is Bob about to lose his job? I said, because I'm trying to gather a crew so I can get down there. And he says, I cannot tell you what the press conference will be about, but I would strongly suggest that you would want to be here.
Yeah.
So at that point, you just have a feeling like, okay, this is a hammer's about to drop somewhere.
Yeah.
And we made a rush to get down there, and when we got there, outside the press conference room, you saw some of the executives, some of the higher ups at UWSP kind of hanging around, and then you still didn't kind of know what was going on. There was a couple of water bottles set at the table, and then you saw Kent Dernbach walking around. He's Bob's top assistant coach, but you didn't see any Bob Semling. So I looked at my photographer and I said, Bob's gone. You know, I thought for sure he's gone. He's nowhere to be found, but yet here's his assistant coach.
Yeah. When, obviously, we'll get to some of these details. obviously the red alerts are going off for you on something that even I had been told off the record, and I had been told in private conversations was a minor infraction. Granted, the delay in hearing from the NCAA piqued my interest a little bit. Did they indicate when the NCAA told them that they had found something else, and when the NCAA would announce their findings officially?
Well, the word that was used today was it's very fluid, and it's still ongoing.
Okay.
Their words. Yeah, I think they were just. I mean, Bob coached last night.
Yeah, he did. Lost, unfortunately.
They lost last night to UWSP, and apparently this morning he comes in and he had no idea that this was coming.
Huh.
So I assume that the NCAA just told them today, this morning, and then they had to do something right away. That was one of the first questions that I asked. I said, if you knew this was coming, why do you let him coach?
Yeah.
Why do you take the risk on vacating whatever wins you have and whatnot? And they said, well, we didn't know it was going to be this severe. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, you're speaking of the severity. One of the things I noticed, at least in the press release that Stevens Point sent out, was that we were talking about infractions that took place over one preseason or one off season, I should say.
We're talking 5 years.
But that's the thing, is it's come out. This is out. It's happened over 5 years. Do you sense that this is a salvo to try and save, whether it be a national championship, whether it be vacating wins, whether it be anything else that the NCAA may slam on them?
They don't know. That was asked by Scott Williams from the Stevens Point Journal. He asked them. I was asking about this season. Scott went a little deeper and said, "Is there any fear that over the last 4 or 5 years, any WIAC championships or their national title from 2015 and gets vacated and whatnot?" And they said, "We don't think so."
Wow. So the NCAA is certainly not giving them much, and they're trying to do whatever they can to maybe appease the NCAA, which I have found in my past doesn't do much. The NCAA usually makes up their mind about a decision, and they go with it, maybe self-imposed before this has all gotten going. And the first self-imposed violations clearly did not appease the NCAA, thus the second round of self-imposed violations. Did you get, obviously, 13 games, you indicated, as much as I've followed Division III basketball for 20-some-odd years, I can't tell you if this is the most games a coach has been suspended for technically, and there's varying reasons. But did you get a sense that this was a hurried decision? It certainly feels from what you're describing that Kent was blindsided, Bob was blindsided, the administration made a decision this morning.
That was the indication, was that this was a decision reached this morning. Now, I can't believe this is you're talking about one of the premier Division III basketball programs in the country.
Absolutely.
We're talking Dodgers, Yankees, nationwide.
Yeah.
I can't imagine they were this blindsided without having some sort of a plan in place. Now, maybe they were, and if that's the case, then your kudos for them for acting quickly and stuff. But I don't know how they. Like I said, if they were just informed today that these are 4 major violations, then I guess we all got played.
I will say this: the NCAA tends to be close-vested when it's in their investigations. I do have a feeling, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here. Maybe Stevens Point had their head in their sand. Maybe they thought, "Hey, we're going to let this blow over. It's no big deal," and then didn't really have a pulse on this investigation.
Maybe. Maybe they thought we're UW Stevens Point.
Yeah.
That's possible.
Yeah.
I asked Athletic Director Brad Duckworth. I asked him point blank. I said, "You said suspended, not fired," and he said, "No, he's been suspended. We have full intent that he will be our coach next year." In my opinion, I don't know how that's possible.
Well, 2 thoughts. Brad Duckworth's brand new to the job. I feel bad for him. In some sense of the word. And second of all, it's a state institution. They kind of have to go through certain protocols, do they not?
Right. I suppose. I wouldn't know what those were until I looked it up. But, if you're talking, if this were a Division I program, the coach doesn't come back, does he? It would hurt. It would hurt recruiting. And the main thing, one of the biggest eyebrow raisers was lack of institutional control. Are you kidding me? At Division III?
Well, to be honest, we've
So-
seen that. Thomas More got nailed with it and lost its national championship
Yeah,
just over,
I
just
saw
before the
that, yeah.
season started. So they love that lack of institutional control one, and you might remember it from USC football.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
love that
it's still
terminology.
Yeah. So as of right now, Kent Dernbach takes over. If Bob doesn't come back, maybe this is an audition for Kent.
Yeah.
You know, he's never been a head coach before.
No.
But here's the other thing to raise a red flag. If they're conducting some of these practices and they're against the rules, who's there helping coach the practices? Kent Dernbach.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very
So
good
how
point.
does if that's the case, obviously you want to have the continuity of the program because he's been there with Bob for the last 2, 3, 4 years. But if he's part of those violations in the end, even though he wasn't the guy who did it, he was part of it. Does he even come back next year if Bob returns? If Bob doesn't return, I should say. So there's so many moving parts right now that we don't know the answers to today. And
Sure.
and you know, come March, you know, if the NCAA announces any final rulings come March, you know, 60, 70 days from now, maybe then we'll have an idea. But I mean, there's so many moving parts of this. It's crazy. It really is. And you know, when the Pointers boosters get word of this, what's going to be their reaction? I mean, the boosters put a lot of money into that program.
What
will be their reaction? You know?
Yeah, that's it. Well, I'm already seeing reactions on Twitter from the players who are out, former players who are irate.
Yeah,
and
I did talk to Jack Bennett today.
Did you? Okay.
I did. I called Jack, and you know, Jack is the one who brought Bob into the program. And
Well, and Jack had his
he said-
issues too, didn't he?
Yeah, I believe so. But you know, talking with Jack today, he said that he feels bad for the players and he feels bad for the program because if this lingers or if it is a major hit, who knows what type of the severity that this will affect the program in the years to come. But he did want me to stress that he thinks that it's a program built rich in the tradition, and they will survive this. He thinks. When they'll survive it, I don't know, but he thinks that the program will survive.
What was the mood? I know when the Thomas More press conference took place, and I happened to watch that one. The president, who's a former AD and former coach, so everything's jumbled in my head right now, was rather peeved. He was frustrated at it. Granted, it was a much different situation. I'm not trying to draw lines. What I'm basically saying is there was a certain mood to that press conference. What was the mood at this press conference?
Well, you know, Brad gets up there and he makes the opening statement right away, and he opens it up for questions. And it's pretty quiet. I think maybe some people didn't know how to react. Now, granted, there were only myself, a representative from the ABC station in town, and the Stevens Point paper. And it was almost like they were kind of slow to react. So I just jumped in and started asking questions. You know how you kind of feel like you don't want to feel like you're dominating a press conference.
Oh yeah.
So, but I feel like you get the ball rolling, and to their credit, you know, to Brad's answers were pretty honest in response to the questions I asked, only because they haven't been through this process before. They're not conditioned to handle a major violation press conference like this.
True.
You know, if I ask the same questions to Barry Alvarez at Wisconsin, he's going to have a standard protocol answer.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was any question you asked that you didn't get the answer you were hoping for? Yeah, that's a wide open question. But
yeah, I mean, there's a lot, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the major things is, you know, they said he will be the coach. They intend for him to be the coach going into next season, but that'll obviously be reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
I asked the AD who told the players, and Brad and Kent Dernbach, the assistant, had the meeting with the players this morning to inform the team and said that they were all shocked and hurt. So while we were still there, Kent was in his office, and there were a couple players shuttling in and out behind closed doors. So he was obviously still meeting with players and stuff. So, as far as any questions unanswered, every question I asked I thought was answered fair enough.
You mentioned fluid situation, and then you made a comment about the NCAA report maybe coming out in March. And I realize you may not be saying that as an actual timeline. Did you get a sense of a timeline?
I did not.
Okay. So it could come out tomorrow, for all we know.
It what?
It could come out tomorrow, for all we know.
It could, but from what I was told from some people, it'll be a couple of months, and maybe that was the thinking that Bob had, was that he had the season.
Interesting, because I also think that he and the rest of them thought it would be wrapped up by October, and then they thought they had the season. This is clear.
If it was minor, If it was minor, you would thought.
Yeah, this has definitely gotten big. Obviously, beyond the fact that they've announced that there were 4 major violations found by the NCAA, we don't even know what the NCAA said. Well, and
the postseason ban is for this year.
Right.
Tournament they can't participate in.
Right.
Obviously, they can't participate in the NCAA tournament. But you're talking about a team right now that's only 6-5 on the season.
Right.
So
it's kind of a ho-hum.
I don't know if that softens the blow.
Yeah. I
don't know if that softens the blow or not, but
I don't think a lot of people had Stevens Point in the postseason this year anyway.
Right.
Granted, they could make a run in the WIAC tournament and get in on an AQ, but with River Falls and La Crosse playing well, even Eau Claire playing very well. River Falls obviously beat them last night. Whitewater playing well. I mean, the chances were slim.
Yeah, and La Crosse, they visit La Crosse Saturday, and La Crosse beat Whitewater last night.
Yeah.
So Ken Dernbach's got his work cut out for him.
Yeah, he certainly does, especially with a season that's essentially lost in the eyes of many of the players. Any other thoughts on what you saw today or this news revelation before we let you go?
No, not really. I just, in my personal opinion, no other influence at all. I just don't know how Bob comes back from this. Based on the reaction from the booster club and stuff, and they may just have to wipe the slate clean. You have a new athletic director that can get in there and bring in his own guy.
Yeah. Who has a basketball experience, obviously, coming from Alverna, too.
Yeah.
So, it's an interesting point. 13 games is a lot to begin with, but it may be the end of Bob Semling there as well. I assume you've reached out to Bob and have not heard back.
No, that would be a negative.
0 for 2 if you count me in that mix, too. So I totally get it. Dale Ryman, I really appreciate you taking some time. I know you are busy, so I'll let you go. Thanks so much, and I'll stay in touch with you. If you learn anything else, let us know.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, Dale Ryman again, sports director, News Channel 7 WSAW. So there you go. That's from the reporter on scene at the press conference, got his take. Notice, he said it a few times. He thinks Bob Semling's in more trouble than just a suspension here. He thinks Bob Semling's not coming back. Raises a good point about the assistant coach, too. Who's running these practices if they're illegal? There's been talk that Bob was there. You got to figure maybe Kent was there. And other assistants. Kent's only been there a handful of years. He wasn't there the entire 5 years. I'll be very, very, very interested to see how this plays out. And let's remember one thing, and I alluded to it in that interview. Stevens Point had a problem with practices, if I remember, under Jack Bennett. I don't remember the exact details of that. I haven't had time to go back and check that. But I believe they had practice violations under Bennett as well. Speaking of Jack Bennett, I got in touch with him as well. He didn't want to say a lot, but he did have something to say. He wanted to at least have a statement. And here's what Jack Bennett told me earlier today. Jack Bennett now joining me here on the Hoopsville hotline. And Coach, you wanted to make a statement.
Well, Dave, I feel very bad for the program here at Stevens Point, for Bob, for his staff, and especially the players. But I will tell you, this program is steeped in rich, deep tradition, and it will learn, it will survive, and it will come back stronger. That's the challenge, and I know that this program will meet that challenge.
Appreciate Jack taking the time to at least call and chat with me. Wasn't comfortable coming on and saying much more. Certainly can understand that. If you're curious, we did reach out to Bob Semling. Did not hear back. No surprise. We also did reach out to the Stevens Point administration. to find out if anybody else would be willing to come on, including Kent, the now interim head coach. They declined at this time. We will continue to pursue that. We could, as early as tomorrow, Friday, hear from somebody at Stevens Point, and if so, we will try and get that to you as quickly as we can. In the meantime, remember one key thing here. We have still not heard from the NCAA, and it's not like you can call them up and find out. They keep the investigation side of things at the NCAA very much separate from everything else on purpose. So it is hard to gather intel sometimes unless you've got the right person to call. They post who is part of the investigative team, or I should say part of the committee, not the investigative team, the committee. We have not reached out to them basically out of respect, don't want to interfere, but we may have to as well. These are significant steps for Stevens Point, considering we don't know what the NCAA has truly found outside of what Stevens Point has told us along the way. Remember, some reporting earlier this year got us going down this road, but we were told this was minor. I was told this was minor. Granted, I'm hearing it from a purple-tinted point of view, but we were told this was minor. Not that we want to stop talking about this topic, but we had booked the rest of the show not with Stevens Point in mind. Well, outside of mentioning they lost last night, not that that's shocking, they're 6-5. However, we are efforting to do one more bit of this at the end of the show, and we will do that, and we will keep you informed on Twitter at D3Hoopsville and hashtag Hoopsville. We may, knock on wood, hear from a former player. We'll ask him if these allegations have any merit. If he remembers any of these violations taking place, he may not know they were violations, but we'll see what his take is on. But we're not positive right now. We at least want to tell you we are working on that. In the meantime, we have 4 other guests booked tonight. We will start with Baldwin Wallace. Women's basketball. Cheri Harrer will join us to talk about the team. Despite their loss last night, the first of the season, they're off to a tremendous start on top of the OAC. Could be a great battle on the women's side. We'll talk to her momentarily. Then we'll go talk to Scott Hemmer. Sadly, for the second time in just about a year's time, he and I are talking about a tragedy with the team. Why this death is different, but why the team's also responding differently, but they're also having a great season. They're playing right now. Scott does double duty. Well, we talked to him earlier. He's coming up on the show. We'll also talk on the men's side. The Hood men's basketball coach Chad Dickman taking over for his father. They're having a magical season this year. Is it too early? Have they peaked too early? They come off a loss to Lycoming. Maybe they are as good as we thought. Actually, I don't think they lost to Lycoming. I think they lost to Albright. We'll double check it nonetheless. A lot going on today. And finally, we'll talk to the number 2 team in the country. Surprise number 2. Whitman is having a great season, including a win over Whitworth. But can they officially dethrone Whitworth? We'll talk to Coach Eric Bridgeland coming up on Hoopsville. And again, we have a new segment called the Mailbag coming up. We got a couple questions from you. You can email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Don't forget, if you are watching us or want to listen to us when we're not on the air live, don't forget to download our podcast. You can find our podcast on the same link as our show right below the video player. You can download it from SoundCloud or download it on iTunes. Make sure you catch podcast. And as a result, ask us questions. We'll answer them on each show on the Hoopsville Mailbag. That's coming up on the show. Plus, we will circle back on the Stevens Point story, including possibly talking to a player. That's all ahead here on Hoopsville. You listen to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA NABC studios. More Hoopsville when we come back.
College basketball lives in Kansas City at the College Basketball Experience at Sprint Center. The College Basketball Experience is the place to get your game on. It's not a museum, it's an experience you won't forget. Discover the history of the game in the National Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame, featuring the Gallery of Honor, Mentor Circle, and Honor Theater. Suit up in the latest CBE logoed Nike gear at the CBE Hoop Shop. Elevate your game today and visit the house that college basketball built.
It starts right when you hit the court. You imagine your finest moment. The game-winning shot that gets you to the dance. A monster dunk or no-look pass, and cutting down the net. Sports lets us dream of our own success and prepare us for our finest moments on and off the court.
I'm a current Division III student athlete, and I remember how intimidating the first year of college can be.
So if you're a first-year student athlete and nervous about coming out as LGBTQ, I pledge to stand by your side as your ally.
If you can play, you can play Division III.
We are Division III student athletes, and you can be too. If you can play in Division III.
I did receive a non-athletic scholarship upon entering school.
I got the presidential scholarship, which was huge for me.
I think there's more opportunities for academic scholarships in Division III.
I did receive academic scholarships. Just being involved on campus, being a leader, all those things combined kind of get me recognized. It's a great experience for me.
Hello, everybody. We're back. Welcome back. Sorry, trying to do Twitter at the same time. It's just too difficult. If you got questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoopsville and hashtag Hoopsville. Email us hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Join us on Facebook, facebook.com/Hoopsville. You can, of course, send us emails, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. If you have any questions to add to the mailbag, we've gotten a few so far, and we'll get to those later in the show. Again, we will talk more about the Stevens Point story coming up, the second major story in Division III basketball this season, and major meaning not championship, off the floor type stuff. We will talk about that later in the show, as we have already. Again, if you missed any of this show, don't worry. You can go back and listen to it when we're done, and you can always download the podcast. So, if you haven't been paying attention to the Great Lakes on the women's side, it's rather interesting. Obviously, Thomas More resides in the Great Lakes, and former champion DePaul lives there as well. Hope, Calvin, we all know those two teams. But the OAC has got one heck of a battle brewing, and it includes a team that is, I wouldn't say reemerged. They've always been around, but Baldwin Wallace has a darn good season on their hands, and despite the loss last night to Mount Union, they're going to make the OAC one heck of a fun one to watch the rest of the way. So joining us on the City of Salem hotline is Coach Cheri Harrer from Baldwin Wallace. Coach, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
First and foremost, I know it's tough to come off the loss last night, but at the same time, you got to be thrilled with the fact that you guys started off 11-0 on the season, and the only blemish so far is the one we're looking at right now.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a good group of kids.
This is a team that's twice in a row been 22-7. You certainly have been in the mix quite a bit, but what has made the start of this season different maybe than the rest?
I think for the most part, our kids have really bought in again. We've had some changes, and it's a really good group that they're really hungry to win. They've put in a lot of time in the off season to improve their games, and it's just a fun group. They're great students too. They had almost a 316 GPA, so it's really a super group.
That's an astounding GPA for an entire group. Obviously, it's tough to do both athletics and academics, and that's what makes Division III so great. But to have that kind of GPA by also having an 11-0 season up until last night and all these other marks, they're making a lot of sacrifices. What has maybe been the biggest thing that you've seen from this squad, maybe off the court, that has made it maybe even more special or allowed the season to develop as it is?
I think a big part of it is we've had a lot of freshmen and sophomores put extra time in the gym. And, it's great when you're walking by and it's November 1st and, it's the dog days of the preseason and kids are getting extra shots up. It makes you really excited for not only the season but for the future.
Obviously, the loss to Mount Union was tough last night, but let's be honest, Mount Union's also not too bad a team. They're 8-4 overall, 3-2 in the conference. Now you guys find yourself a game back of Ohio Northern. Muskegum is in the conversation. You can't forget about Wilmington, who's also there. So OAC is kind of shaping up to be a pretty good race, a bit of a dog up there.
Oh, no doubt. We've got a lot of great players and great coaches. Our ninth place team last year didn't make our conference tournament. It was 6-1 non-league. Like, it's a ridiculously good league top to bottom. And, you don't bring your A game on a night, you're going to get beat.
Yeah, I was going to say, which begs the question, did you guys bring your A game or did Mount Union bring a better game?
A little bit of each. We didn't play to our potential, missed a lot of layups, and just did some really dumb things. And had a 32% three-point shooter, 28 threes on the year, went 8 for 10 from three with a hand in her face. So, stuff happens in the conference.
Well, I was going to say that when they're shooting that well, being aggressive, and they're going to shoot that well percentage-wise, sometimes you just hand it to them and say thank you, and we'll go back and look at the drawing board again. Granted, that was a home game, and you'll see them again before the end of the season, second to last game. But how do you see this conference shaping up? As you pointed out, the last place team last year was, I should say the last place team in the mix, et cetera, et cetera. Is this deep? Is this going to be top heavy? Is the middle going to play a factor? How do you see it actually shaking out? Can you stay on top?
Well, Ohio Northern's defending the last 2 years, so they're obviously the team to beat. But, Wilmington is right there. Hopefully we're right there in the mix. And the thing is every team, our 9th and 10th place teams on any given night could knock off the top team. That's how deep this league is. And, so it's going to be a dogfight, and I'm sure we'll see more surprises as we go through the year.
When you look at this team specifically, it's certainly a young team, but it also has its seniors. But, you look at it, and it's dominated by juniors and sophomores when you look at the roster. You've got height. You got 6-footers in here, 5'11". You also have a solid core of guard play. Is this a well-balanced squad? Is this maybe inside dominant, outside dominant? How would you portray your team?
Probably more outside dominant. We like our mix. We have 3 really good seniors that are really important to what we're doing this year. We also have 4 freshmen that are contributing in a lot of ways, and then everything in between. So we're excited about the future, but we'd really like to send these seniors out with a great year.
Well, Mackenzie Colombo, one of those seniors, leading the way at 12.2 points a game and 2 rebounds a game. 3.5 assists a game and a steal and a half a game. Sydney Clark, a senior, 10.5 points a game, 3.5 rebounds. Hannah Feck, the sophomore, 10.2 and 6.7 on the rebounding numbers. And I gypped Clark. She's actually at 4.8 on the rebounding number. And then that other senior, Clara Lemon, as you mentioned, 7.5 points a game and 7.5 rebounds a game. That's a lot of equal distribution of points and rebounds, and 2 of them are guards, 2 of them are forwards.
Yeah, and that's our goal. We've always, even when we've been Elite 8 teams and ranked, ideally we have 3, 4, 5 kids in double figures because we don't like to rely on one kid having to carry the load. We'd like people not to know who to try to shut down so that hopefully we can keep scoring regardless.
Last year didn't make the NCAA tournament, lost to Mount Union in the end, which was last night was basically the rematch of that championship game. Of course, back 2 years ago, you guys lost to Calvin. I believe it was the first round of the NCAA tournament. How much is the team driving on, hey, we want to be there too. We want to get back to what we did and get back to the NCAA tournament again and make a bigger difference?
The seniors really want it. As freshmen, the seniors actually played in the Sweet 16 game. We lost to FDU Florham the year they won it.
Yeah.
And so they still have that taste, and they would love nothing more than to get back to that level.
So you got this 3 seniors. At the same time, we talked about that youth. In essence, this is also building towards the future, as pretty much every team does every year, but you definitely have that core group of younger players. How important, as much as maybe getting the NCAA tournament and doing well again, how important, though, is it also to get this younger group the experience they need so that the following year is just as successful as now and the following year after that?
Oh, it's critical. Those freshmen are really competitive kids, as are sophomores. And, to get them some fruits of their labor and get them a taste of what it's like to play at that level would be really important for our program. But regardless of what happens, I know those kids are going to work really hard because that's who they are.
If I have this correctly, you have 536 wins overall. Does it get old?
Yeah, I didn't even know what the number was. I do know we're awfully close to getting 200 losses.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to bring that up, but you're at 198.
Yeah, unfortunately, it'd be nice not to hit that number this year, but in our conference, that's going to be tough to not do. But it does. I mean, the kids change every year, and this year's a particularly great group to work with. They're very coachable. They respond well to film sessions, and that's what keeps you going. The positive kids, the kids that are just terrific young people to work with, and then what they're doing when they graduate. We've got some ultra successful graduates out there, and that's what keeps you going.
You've got Wilmington on the road coming up on Saturday. You're then back home against Ohio Northern, then on the road against Otterbein, and then you have a nice 4-game stretch where you'll play at home against John Carroll, Muskegon, Heidelberg, and Marietta. What's the message to a team when they're coming off their first loss of the season, which I know is probably a tough one to take? How do you recenter them and focus them on Wilmington and this stretch ahead?
Well, we really have been talking all year about this is get better every day and use ourselves as the measuring stick, regardless of who's up next. And that's the approach we're taking. We didn't get better on Wednesday. We took a step back in some things, but we took a step forward in some other things. So it's really continuing to try to put complete game together and get as close to that as we can every single time we step on the court, regardless of who we're going up against.
You're also the women's athletic director, correct, at Baldwin Wallace?
Actually, just the SWA.
Oh, just
point.
The SWA. Obviously, that means you've got other responsibilities, and overseeing the entire department's tough. How do you balance everything? How do you almost keep your eye on the job, obviously, as basketball coach, but at the same time balance the responsibilities that you also have to the entire department?
You have to have great assistant coaches, and I'm really blessed right now that I've got a couple assistants that really make my job a whole lot easier because I can rely and trust on them in a lot of ways, and that allows me to be able to take care of some other things that I need to take care of as well.
Got to ask, obviously, Thomas More with their title stripped from 2 seasons ago at the beginning of the year. Now we're talking about Stevens Point, who's handed down its own rather aggressive penalties. We still haven't heard from the NCAA. As an administrator, you're probably keeping a tab on all of that. Your reactions to what is in Division III world a rather interesting and maybe disappointing year in that realm.
Yeah, I mean, it's always disappointing. And the thing, everybody works so hard, and you're always trying to get that edge. And it's frustrating because, some people out there maybe aren't doing things above board, but you got to. And I think D3 is probably the most uneven playing field of all levels, but that's our world, and that's what we have to live with. And it's about helping young kids get better, and if we keep our focus on that, then everything else is going to take care of itself, hopefully without any of those other negatives coming along.
And that's my way of transitioning into Thomas More is obviously in your region. They're fired up from what has happened. They're having a pretty darn good season, but you also have DePaul, and you have Mount Union in your conference in Ohio Northern. You also have Hope, and you have Calvin. Great Lakes is a bit of a challenging region.
Carnegie Mellon.
Carnegie Mellon. Good point. Yeah, Carnegie Mellon standing out as well.
Yep.
It's a tough region to stand out from. How do you make sure you guys stand out as much from the crowd as possible, and especially when it comes to regional rankings?
That's something we really can't control. All we can control is going out, playing hard every day, doing the best we can every day, and hopefully we get the wins that count to help us get there. But we can't control what other teams are doing. We can't control any of that. We'll just do what we can do to be the best we can be, and hopefully it all works out well for us in the end.
Certainly can understand. Coach, appreciate you taking the time to talk about us. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing how your team does the rest of the way. It looks like it's going to be a fun season for the Yellow Jackets. Hopefully you can enjoy it. Obviously coming up with Wilmington. As always, I would give the coach the final word. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who may be tuning in?
Now, I just want to thank you, Dave, for all you do for Division III basketball. It's wonderful to have you on board and helping us out. So thank you.
Thank you, Coach. Appreciate the kind words. Like I said, good luck the rest of the way. Hopefully we're talking about the Yellow Jackets come March.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, take care.
Thanks, you too.
Cheri Harrer joining us once again on the City of Salem hotline. She's the head coach of the Baldwin Wallace Yellow Jackets women's basketball team. Again, off to 11-1 start. Their one loss coming last night to Mount Union. That's Wednesday night for those who may be listening on the podcast, 72-62. They've got Wilmington coming up on Saturday before returning home against Ohio Northern, back on the road against Otterbein, back at home against John Carroll, and that John Carroll game starts 4 straight at home. You know they'll want to take advantage of that. Going to take another break. When we come back, we talk about, unfortunately, another tragedy at Geneseo, but why this one's different, how the team's responding, and plenty more, because the team was already on our list to come on the show. They were 9-0. They're 9-0. We wanted to talk to the Knights anyway, but how are they overcoming yet another emotional journey, as it were? Scott Hammer joins us here on Hoopsville. Don't forget, coming up, we'll still talk men's basketball with Hood men's basketball coach Chad Dickman. Also talk Whitman men's basketball with their head coach Eric Bridgeland. And we'll return to the topic of Stevens Point. Working on how we'll finish the show, but we'll have our final thoughts on that as well. You listen to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA NABC studios. More Hoopsville right after this.
I used to never really talk. Ever. I was afraid if I said something wrong, everyone would laugh at me. But then I started to play golf with Special Olympics. It helped me to find my voice. And now everyone else is speechless.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
Cheer for the stumbles. The he shoulda had that's. And the tears that linger. For in those moments, greatness lies. There, you will find the provoked, the determined, the unified. It's in those moments that champions are born.
We are calling you, all of you. We are calling all Division III schools to join our cause.
It's on us to start the change. It's on us to be the change. It's on us. It's on Division III. It's on all of us to stop sexual assault.
And welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. Our first show back from the holiday break, as we've mentioned. We hope you're enjoying it. If you got questions for us, especially for our upcoming mailbag segment, a new segment to the show, make sure you email us for the mailbag, hoopsville at d3hoops.com. If you got questions for us via Twitter, you can do it via at D3Hoopsville or use the hashtag Hoopsville. You can also join us on Facebook, facebook.com/Hoopsville. Obviously, we're live streaming through there as well, though it's harder to monitor that, but we'll do our best, especially as a one-man band. We're also on Instagram, though we don't monitor that during the show, at D3Hoopsville there as well, and so on and so forth. Lots to cover. Obviously, we covered a bunch at the beginning. We have the mailbag segment coming up, etc. Now time to get into the tough news from the holiday. Many of you may know the Geneseo's story, especially on the women's basketball side. It has been a tough year, to say the least. Losing 2 members of the team in 2 different ways can affect the team in many different ways. Last year they rallied, won 15 games at least, if not more, got to the NCAA tournament, make a dent in the NCAA tournament. Certainly was a pretty great job after Kelsey Annis' death. But unfortunately, the same team is dealing with the same thing for different reasons yet again. And so, as always, we are impressed that Scott Hammer agrees to come on our show. He did almost a year ago after Kelsey's death, and he's agreeing to come on the show again today. And I appreciate it, Scott, joining us on the Hoopsville Hotline presented by the City of Salem. Scott, thank you so much.
Dave, thanks for having us. It's always great to be on the show, and obviously wish it was different circumstances as well. But love what you guys do for the game.
Well, thank you. I told you previously a few weeks ago, and even before this interview, and I should say to the audience, we were planning to get you guys on the show at some time real soon because you're off to a tremendous start. I wanted to talk about just basketball, but unfortunately, the news right before Christmas was a little tough to take. I know it's tough for the team, the death of Savannah Williams, a freshman in a car crash right as you guys were releasing for the holiday break. Not exactly what you guys want to deal with yet again, is it?
No. There's so many emotions, and the fact that it's the second loss within a year doesn't make it any easier, and then throw on top that it occurred just before the holidays, that only magnifies it. As I said to the kids a number of times, especially when we first got back onto campus together, that the unfortunate part of life is that sometimes, maybe too often, we need to learn how to play the hand that's dealt to us, good and or bad. And at this point, it's our turn to throw, and we've got a choice to make. And they've made good choices in the past, and I'm sure they'll do it again moving forward.
Obviously, this would be an interesting story to begin with. Lose a player right as the holidays starting, as you're going on break. But of course, it's compounded to the fact that you lost a senior last year in a very different manner. But the fact that this was right as the team had been let go essentially for some time off, and the team kind of scatters into the wind, that makes it just a little bit more difficult for you guys to handle, I would assume.
I think logistically there were challenges for sure. When Kelsey Neese was killed last January 17th, at that point everybody was on campus, and it was getting everybody together and trying to find the words, and you're standing in front of the room and they're looking for answers, and although I didn't have any, I had to say something. But at least you had a sense for the room. You could see reactions and you could deal accordingly. And this year I mean, when I found out, I was actually at home. I had gone home, I had dinner with the family, and I was just getting ready to head out the door to go recruiting. And at that point, you learn the news, and it's how do you get the message out to your players? How do you do it effectively? How do you get the read of the emotion? And so here I am sitting down trying to make a call one at a time and make sure that, I think the first thing I wanted to do was make sure that they were either home, or I didn't want to talk to somebody. I mean, our kids, a lot of our players had left that afternoon from final exams, excuse me, and were heading home. And I wanted to make sure they weren't driving, sitting on the phone with me, having this conversation. And of course, they know. I mean, I'm close with my players, but they know if I'm picking up the phone to call them directly, there's something significant going on, and so close to when they left, and I just was trying to be very careful of that. And then of course, there's a wide range of emotion, whether it's the returners who have been through this before, and all the way to the first year freshmen who are now experiencing that type of tragedy potentially for the first time in their life. It was very difficult, and it was challenging. And then the follow-up is, how do you continue to communicate effectively with your team moving forward, whether it's making arrangements to get the team to calling hours and a funeral, and how the team wants to be there to support Savannah's family, and do we come back for basketball? Do we not come back for basketball? I've been doing this 20-some years at this point, and I've never had to do a conference call to try to communicate with my team, and that was certainly something new for us. But, those are some of the challenges that we faced when this all happened.
Obviously, last year, sudden death of a student in her own home, it's shocking not only to the team. It was a second student who was killed as well, and that was shocking to the community. It was shocking to the town as well. This is not something the town was kind of ready for, as it were. Now, this time around, it's an unfortunate car crash. It's different emotions involved, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you talk about the community. The community's been great. Tonight is our first home game since the accident, the most recent accident. And the community has been very supportive. The surrounding community, the college community, people, obviously the students are gone, so the crowds over intercession tend to be a little thinner, but I think the community has made a point to make sure that doesn't happen for the players tonight, and everybody's been really great about that. But the school has been supportive of making sure that everything's ready to go tonight, and it has been a different range of emotions. And last time when this happened, obviously the situation is a little different. You've got a murder versus just a tragic car accident, and last time my players had a strong sense of just anger, and when we got back on the floor, that drove them. Right now, it's just still the shock and the sadness, and unfortunately, I'm not sure what buttons to push with this group to get them focused on basketball, and for that matter, I'm still trying to figure out if that's the right thing for us to do. But we're trying to deal with it. But yeah, it's certainly a different range of emotions.
I should have pointed out at the beginning, we obviously are talking to you on a pre-taped as you're playing as this is airing live. We'll get a scoring update in just a little bit. They got a game against Elmira in non-conference play. Before we move on to talk about the team and the season in a general sense, and this program has seemed to be through the ringer. You had the Leah Sabrowski story, near death, gets a liver transplant, amazing recovery, tremendous story. Then, unfortunately, the Kelsey story last year, and now the Savannah story. Is there a point, even in your mind or the team, that enough's enough? We've been through this ringer. This is a little bit too much to handle.
Sure. I think at first, this time when everything happened, I think obviously we all wanted to make sure that our thoughts first and foremost were with Savannah's family. They were so excited. Savannah was a walk-on for us, and we've only had about 3 walk-ons in the 10 years I've been here, and Kelsey was one, and now Savannah was another. And again, 20 years, I'm not sure I've ever seen a player or a family as excited to have their daughter be a part of our team. And so they were very close with the program in a short amount of time, and I think everybody wanted to focus on them and trying to do what we could to support them first and foremost. But you can't help but have some of that feelings, and although I understand it comes across as a little shallow, you can't help but have some of those feelings. With Leah, Leah's diagnosed in the middle. This was 3-4 years ago now. Leah's diagnosed in the middle of the season with a rare liver disease and is on the verge of dying if she can't get a transplant. And we went through that in the middle of the season, playing basketball 6 days a week between practice and games, and the players spending Sundays in the hospital visiting with her, and that was a grind for them to keep themselves afloat. And then obviously with last year and just the devastation of what transpired, and they wanted to persevere for her and wanted to be strong to honor her. She was a captain and she was all about the team, and they wanted to do that for her. And but by the end, I've told people when we lost to Stevens in the second round last year, we actually played pretty well. Stevens just played a little bit better, and we had called a timeout. It was still a pretty tight game with about a minute and a half to go, and I had called a timeout, and I just looked at my team in the timeout, and I said to my assistants after they left the huddle that they're at peace with it. That they were exhausted physically and mentally, and it was okay, that they had laid it on the line, and they just lost to a team that was better that day, and they were going to be okay with it. And they make it through that, and they regroup this year, and they're off to a great start. And then Savannah's loss, and again, because it happened different, it doesn't change the way these kids handle it. It's still a loss of somebody close to them, and there's certainly that sense within those kids that just can't believe they're being asked to do this again, and right now we're really struggling to find a purpose. It's been a challenge every day since we've got back. They've done a great job of being here every day and trying to get through it. But it's been a challenge for them. And again, we had the first game the other night, and we were able to get out of Buffalo with a win. But I could see all day that there was that they just lacked a little bit of the focus, and who can blame them? And so, we're going to try again tonight, and that's all we can do at this point.
Before we move on and talk about the team and the season, tell us a little bit about Savannah. You mentioned one of maybe 3 walk-ons in your tenure, and obviously the family was happy, but tell us a little bit about her. Why was she successful as a walk-on, and what was she providing to this team?
Well, Savannah was, she was kind. She was a genuine person who just had such a positive outlook on life and life every day. She loved her teammates, loved being a part of the program. As I said, she was so excited to make the team, and it's almost as if her pride in being selected for this team was contagious to the other people around her. And even though she was a freshman and it was a short time on the team, certainly didn't minimize her impact. She came in, we potentially had a roster spot available, and she came in to meet with me. She had contacted me late spring, wanted to try out for the team. We talked about what our needs were. We were really kind of hoping that we could find a forward to slot into that extra spot, and she was a guard, and she was a tall guard at 5'9", but she had played on the perimeter most of her career. And I said to her, "Listen, your best bet is to learn very quickly how to put yourself in a position to be able to play with your back to the basket a little bit." And she went out and did that. She came in, and the one thing about Savannah, and I tried to push this team as a whole going into the season, was that they were going to have to step out of their comfort zone a little bit. With this team, they've lost 3,000-point scorers over the last 2 years to graduation, and we've had a lot of success. But how do you then replace that when you don't have anybody close to that type of offensive production returning? So we had talked about people stepping out of their comfort zone from day one, and here's a freshman who hasn't even made the team yet, who is still part of tryouts, and she's stepping up in drills, communicating, which for freshmen in general is usually a process. And here she is, and you could see that she was uncomfortable doing it, but she was also determined to put her best foot forward and not have regrets to make this team, and she did that, and that's part of why we selected her, and again, that pride became contagious for everybody around her. She was a kid that smiled every day, good and bad. She found ways to smile, and that smile, whether it was in the gym or in my office after telling her individually that we were going to keep her on the roster, that smile could light up a room.
She played in 6 games, averaged a few minutes a game, averaged a handful of points, or got a handful of points, I should say. This team is 9-0 going into tonight's game, which obviously is taking place as this is airing against Elmira. You got your win back after the holiday, after a long, almost month-long break against Medaille, 59-40. You have 4 seniors on this squad, and they're the leaders. Katie Duran, 11 points a game, 4.3 rebounds. Bridget Ryan, 10.6 points a game, 7 rebounds a game. Kara Holpert, I hope I said her name right, 8.6 and 4.2, and Katie Vinanos, 6.6 and 2.2. I should mention Hobart, 3.2 assists a game as well. 4 seniors who are clearly leading the way. I get a sense they want this season to be special.
Well, Kavanaugh is also a senior, so we do have 5. And
there you go, 5 out of the 6.
Yeah, and they've been tremendous leaders from the beginning and certainly through all of this. And again, none of them are returning all conference players, but they're trying to step outside their comfort zone a little bit and get us moving in the right direction. They've been here for 4 years now, and all of them have played pretty significant key roles in our success over their time since they've been here. They've been in the conference tournament each year. They've been here in the championship game. They've been to the NCAA tournament twice. So they've had success. And, I think the one thing about the kids in our program is the more you tell them that they probably shouldn't be able to do something, the more resilient they become. And again, they're well aware that, McGinnis, who was a first-team All-American, graduates, and then you lose McKenna and Cohen, both 1,000-point scorers the next year. McKenna being an All-American honorable mention. You lose that, and people start to question whether or not you're going to be able to maintain the same success you've had over the last, 6-7 years now. They've gotten to 20-plus wins. I think they took that personally and have pushed forward and have gotten us off to a good start on the court.
Kavanaugh, as you mentioned, one top 5 of the 6 top scorers, averaging 5 points a game. Kelsey Poplawski, the sophomore, 5.7 points a game. What, outside of the tragedies, what has made this program so good, so special to have the seasons you have rattled off in the last few years? Obviously, 20-7 back in 2013, 25-5 in 2015. 2016, 21-8, obviously off to a 9-0 start as we speak. What has worked for the Knights?
We get some pretty good players. I've come to the realization that good kids attract good kids, and that has helped us attract some special players and some special human beings, and they are willing to be a part of something bigger than themselves, and we preach that not just in practice and what we talk about, but in how we play, and we try to keep the basketball part simple. If you wanted to scout us, you could pull up a film from 5 to 10 years ago and learn almost as much from watching that as you could from us today. We try to keep the game simple. We defend and we rebound, and we place an emphasis on that. I'm smart enough to understand that players aren't going to remember everything you teach them every day, but they will remember what you emphasize. And for us, it's defense and rebounding. I believe we're currently at about a plus 10 rebound margin on the season, and we're holding opponents to, I believe, 44 or 43 points per game. And if you can do those two things consistently, I'm not very strong at math, but I'm smart enough to understand that if you can control those two things, you're going to give yourself a chance to win a lot of games versus coming up on the short end.
You have 2 non-conference games tonight against Elmira, upcoming against Rochester Tech. Rochester Tech is off to an 8-2 start, though lost their last 2 games. The rest is conference play, and obviously SUNYAC is an important part of the schedule, to say the least. You're on top, tied with Fredonia right now. Cortland is lurking along with New Paltz, Oneonta, and Brockport. What's the message to the team outside of the tragedies, but what's the message to the team to get through the rest of the bulk of this season and best position yourself for March?
Well, I think the message is twofold. I think, one, don't change who we are. Defense and rebounding, and those are 2 things you can control every night. You're not always going to get all the bounces and the breaks with the ball in the basket, but you can control how hard you work, both physically and mentally, on the defensive end, and how committed you are to controlling the board. So we don't want to change that. But the second part is I also don't want to pretend that what we've gone through doesn't matter or doesn't exist. I think that would be a mistake for us. So, for one, I saw one of the interviews that was done on one of the Binghamton news channels, and one of Savannah's close friends, her name was Mariah Conklin, I believe, on the interview said something along the lines of that she felt sorry that everybody was sad because she knew that Savannah wouldn't want that at all. And I'm trying to use that with my kids. We talked about how much Savannah loved the opportunity to play. And we talked about that smile that she had every day. And so we're trying to use that to not pretend this didn't happen to us, but to respect it and try to honor it with how we play. And, if we can do some of that moving forward, again, all I ask these players, our team, to do is to put us in a position at the end of each season to compete for a conference championship. And I feel if we can focus on those couple of things, then we can do that on the floor.
What do you expect of this conference? You finished with New Paltz tied last year at the conference regular season. What do you expect from the conference this year?
Well, I think everybody in our conference lost a lot last year to graduation. I think there's significant roster overhauls, at least when you're looking at a lot of the starting lineups. But, you have a team like Fredonia that has a lot back, and they're off to a tremendous start. And we've got them coming up twice next week, which is absolutely insane scheduling. But It is what it is, and you've got a team like Oswego who struggled last year, but had a couple of significant injuries and illnesses that they lost or were missing players that are all back now. So they're still just getting themselves started again, back on track as they put these pieces together and are, according to what I've seen, getting more competitive. You've got Cortland that's always Cortland. They're always good. You've got New Paltz, whose style is going to put pressure on teams every game. You've got Oneonta, whose defense is always going to limit scoring, and Buff State's turning their roster over. Plattsburgh's turning their roster over. Potsdam has a new coach. There's a lot of different pieces moving along here as people go through these roster changes. So it's kind of hard to tell, but we're not looking forward to playing Fredonia twice next week. I can tell you that much.
I was going to say, Fredonia twice in 5 days. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got Brockport first, and there's a team that has a lot of talented freshmen, and I know they've come up short a lot this year, but they've got some talented freshmen, and when that light bulb goes on, they can be pretty good. I just hope it's not Saturday.
Yeah, you hope it's not when you're playing them. Maybe against everybody else.
They could wait till after February 3rd when we play them the second time. That would be great.
Perfect. Make the run and then fizzle out at the end for you, just so you don't see them in the playoffs too.
Be great. Be great.
Hey, Scott, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show, especially now that we've had to talk twice about tragedy. I'm really looking forward to having you on the show when we don't have to do that. Again, the team off to a great start playing tonight. We look forward to seeing how you do against Elmira. My best to the team and the community, as always, as you probably knew that already, but I'll say it publicly. And good luck the rest of the way. Going to be cheering you on, as always. And as always, we give the coach the final word. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who may be tuning in?
Well, I'm certainly appreciative for you taking the time to recognize us. You've been a great friend of our program, and we really admire what you do for our sport, especially at the Division III level. I do want to take an opportunity to send a thank you out, as I did last year around this time, for all of the support we've had through the tough circumstances. Again, the amount of support we've received is overwhelming at times, whether it's from opposing coaches, administrators at other colleges, basketball officials. We've even gotten cards from parents of players at other schools that aren't even on our schedule. It's really nice to know that there's a lot of good left out there in this world where people can come together to support each other following a tragedy. So I'm very appreciative for that and wanted to say thank you. And last, if there are any players that are out there listening to this show tonight, the one thing that we all learned from Sav was to embrace opportunity and to make the most out of it. And So I think on behalf of my team, I'd certainly like to encourage all of the players listening to make the most out of their opportunity and embrace their time, especially with their teammates. That this thing called life goes quickly, and sometimes, unfortunately, the end is quicker than we can anticipate. And again, I just like to make sure everybody tries to take a step back and make sure they're embracing the opportunity that they have in front of them to play college basketball and develop relationships with their teammates and coaches.
Well said. I appreciate the time. Happy New Year. Good luck, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, my friend. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Scott Hemmer joining us from Geneseo. Again, the team is 9-0. They're playing Elmira tonight. We'll get a scoring update later in the show. They then get into conference play once again. They're 4-0 in conference action with a home game against Brockport coming up on Saturday. Then on the road, and this is where it gets weird, at Fredonia, then at Buffalo State, then home against Fredonia all next week. Real quirk. In the meantime, hats off to the community for dealing with yet another death. It certainly is not easy to deal with one, let alone two for the program in a year. Savannah Williams will certainly be remembered as much as her former teammate prior to her and the rest. Our hearts are out to the Geneseo community, and we're rooting on everybody who was a Knight. So you're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA NABC studios. More Hoopsville after this.
This is our It's On Us pledge. It's on us to make a personal commitment to help keep all people safe from sexual assault, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, or ability.
Not to be bystanders to the problem, but to be leaders of the solution. We invite you to join us in this campaign by informing your campuses about the It's On Us mission.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com. We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
For the love of the game. That's what it's all about, they say. But for those of us who are Division III student athletes, it's more than that.
It's more about team and the schools and communities we represent.
And for the many of us blessed with the strength to compete in sport at the college level, we understand that, with what we were given, comes a special obligation.
Our obligation to help those who have their own special needs and whose love for the game is no less intense.
That is why NCAA Division III teamed up with Special Olympics. Since August of 2011, we and others from Division III campus communities have volunteered more than 250,000 hours, time away from the classroom and practice field, reaching across the country to coach and mentor Special Olympics athletes.
And to learn that in giving, we receive so much more in return. Help us keep that dream alive.
Be part of it.
Get involved.
You can make a difference.
And welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the show. I want to thank all of our guests so far who've been on the show. Thank you for taking the time. I wanted to give you a scoring update. We mentioned that Geneseo, we just talked to Scott Hemmer, mentioned that he was still obviously doing the game. They were playing, I should say, while we were interviewing him. Obviously, it was pre-taped. We want to mention Geneseo's not having much trouble right now. It is 8:33 left to go in the fourth quarter, and they lead Elmira 63-36. So Geneseo, despite the challenges, will be 10-0, most likely, by the end of the night. Don't forget, coming up, we have a couple of things still to go. We have our new mailbag segment, which we'll be bringing to you shortly. We were going to sneak it in now, but we're running a little bit behind. That's why we're going to keep going with our segment, but we'll get into the end of the show. Also, we will be talking to a former Stevens Point student-athlete, men's basketball player. Alex Richard's agreed to come on the show. We will talk to him, ask him some questions about what he saw going on. We'll discuss more about that. But now we're going to switch into men's basketball after talking to a couple of women's teams. If you haven't been paying attention to the Mid-Atlantic, well, I can understand that. Obviously, Salisbury's had some headlines. Christopher Newport's had some headlines. Everybody else is kind of flying a little bit under the radar. Swarthmore's gotten some attention, but otherwise not much to talk about on a national scale. Inside the Mid-Atlantic region, it's a little bit busy. And one of the conferences that's always fun to watch is the MAC Commonwealth. We've had the likes of Stevenson and Alvernia, Lycoming even recently, and Messiah, who've all been at the top recently. Well, one team that snuck its way to the top to start this season is Hood, under second-year head coach Chad Dickman. What's going on with the Blazers? One person who told me a couple weeks ago is defense. It's all about defense. Is that true? Well, the easiest way to find out is to go to the head coach of the team and talk to him. Chad Dickman joins us on the Skype City of Salem hotline. Coach, can you hear me? And are you good?
I can.
Good.
Dave, and I appreciate you having me.
I appreciate you coming on, especially via Skype. So, is it defense?
As of right now, yes. It's definitely defense. Our zone has been pretty strong this year and last year. Offensively, we're trying to find our way. We're kind of experimenting with a couple different things and trying to use our personnel to the best of our abilities. But for right now, our calling card has been defense, and I know we're up there in the top of the country and in the defensive standings, and that's been more or less what's gotten to us to this point right now is just our play on that end. We work on it a lot, but we also work on offense a lot, and we just gotta figure some things out on the offensive end. But yeah, definitely, if there's one thing that I think has helped us the most up to this point, it's been half-court defense.
One person said to me, it's about defense. They said it's about the 2-3. Maybe I'm naive, but the 2-3 seems to be, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but I mean it seems to be the introductory to zone defenses. But I find it ironic that a lot of teams struggle against a 2-3. Granted, I think they struggle against a lot of zones in general, but the 2-3 is the one I see as the most common. So why is yours working maybe a little bit better than everybody else?
Well, not too many teams, I would venture to guess, work on it as much as we do. It's a staple of our practice. We work on it every day. We have different variations that we play, and depending on what the offense does, we can switch it up or use adjustments that our guys are comfortable with. But usually a 2-3 is something you can throw out there a few possessions and get a team rattled a little bit that's kind of on a roll, and then once they kind of hit their stride, you got to jump out of it. But with the way we play it, it's just one of those things where we've kind of pulled some stuff from a lot of different 2-3 zones and used a lot of different concepts. And I've more or less used all the things I've liked from, a little bit of Syracuse, a little bit of this team, a little bit of high school teams, anything I think that we think can benefit our personnel and the teams that we play against. If I think they'll struggle against that, we try to incorporate it. So, we use a lot of different setups in practice just to kind of make sure we're ready for anything that the offense may throw at us. But again, teams may play through 2-3 here and there, but I'm sure they're not putting as much time into it as we do in practice. And we do work on some man here and there, but honestly, if we're playing man-to-man, we're not where we're at right now. It's just not our personnel. And I think we've gotten to the point where we're comfortable enough playing zone the majority, if not all, of the game, and we trust that defense that that's more or less our calling card. So, we're defensively, we're fine so far. Hopefully it keeps up. Offensively, again, as you mentioned, I think that's going to be where we need to improve the most if we want to get to where we want to go.
Talking to Chad Dickman here, head coach of the Hood men's basketball team in the MAC Commonwealth. Talking to him via Skype. We appreciate him taking the time. What's interesting is, this is a Commonwealth that, D3 hoops group. I can't remember where we put you guys. I went somewhere around 10 or 15, somewhere in the 10 to 15 range, I think, in terms of one of the top conferences. I might be wrong. Gordon's probably listening and correct me. It's definitely in the top 20. But we talked about its depth. There hasn't been a top of this conference that has dominated in a number of years. The middle is always full of good teams, and the bottom is just good enough to ruin anybody's night on any given night. But the top's continually changing. Alvernia's won in the tournament the last couple of years, or for a couple of years, but Stevenson was on top of the regular season. Lycoming started the season last year tremendously, but it was Alvernia who ended up finishing on top. Lycoming is on top now. I think I say that completely. Albright's on top now, interestingly enough, kind of coming from the back of the pack for a while. With Lycoming up there, Lebanon Valley's back in the mix. You're in the mix with Alvernia. Arcadia's lurking. Obviously, that makes it fun, but it's also got to make it a little bit frustrating.
Yes, it is a rough. When we hit January, it's a rough go, and maybe it's just personal experience, but we've always been very good out of conference. I mean, we were 8-1 out of conference this year, 2-2 in the conference, and we could very easily be 0-4 in the conference. I'm biased, but I think our conference is very, very underrated. I think we just beat up on each other throughout the year. And you're right. I don't think there's any team such as a Christopher Newport that rolls through the conference and loses one game all year. But, you know, I always tell people our worst team in our conference is always a good Division III team. So there's no off nights. And anyone can beat anyone. And I think you can look at the scores throughout the season and you'll see so many single-digit games. I mean, it's amazing. But, you know, I think Rick Ferry was on earlier this season and said something about, you know, our conference didn't have a couple of those signature national wins, which is true. But, you know, it seems like when our conference is so even, when one of our teams gets to the national tournament, it's usually because they won the conference tournament, and it's usually not the number one seed. And so they're usually playing at someone's home gym in the region, and it never fails. They usually give that team, you know, a heck of a run that first game. But, you know, I'm sure I'm partial to our conference this year. We haven't done as well out of conference as I would have expected, because I think our conference is still very, very good. But they've had a couple, you know, tough games. But, you know, like I said, when we get to January, we know that it's going to be just a battle night in and night out. And, you know, some conferences, you may have those one or two teams where it's just like, oh, well, thank God we have so-and-so coming up. We don't have that luxury in our conference whatsoever. You know, very well-coached conference, very, very solid teams, no unbeatable teams. But, you know, if you don't show up to play, you're going to get beat without a doubt.
When it comes to your program, you're in your second year. You followed your father, Tom Dickman. By the way, I don't remember Tom playing that much 2-3 zone. If I remember correct. I think he was more of a man-to-man guy. But you did follow your father. You played at St. Vincent, so you obviously had some small college experience. Were they D3 when you were there?
No, they were NAI when I was there.
They were NAI. I thought the transition had been after. What drove you to stay in coaching, because you did some coaching afterward, and then follow your father and then take over for a program that he had done so amazingly well for during his tenure?
Well, when I graduated college, I had actually had plans to go to grad school and get my MBA. And, you know, I love playing so much. Coaching hadn't really crossed my mind because I was really upset that my playing career was done and I thought I had to move on. But I ended up getting a call from Jay DeFrugio, who was the head coach at Wheeling Jesuit, Division II school in West Virginia at the time. And we used to scrimmage them when I was at St. Vincent. And, you know, we had a pretty good rapport when he had come up and we had gone down there. And my father is actually from Wheeling. And so there was a little bit of a connection there. And his assistant had just left to take an assistant coaching job at Dayton, I believe. And this was in like late August or early August. And so he was scrambling and he wanted to find a young guy because the guy that had left was kind of he was an older guy looking to jump up the ranks. So he wanted to find a younger guy that would stay there for a while. And so I ended up taking that job and got into the coaching business. And while I was in grad school, I'd actually coached at St. Vincent for 1 year while I was going to grad school at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. So that was more of a part-time thing. So at Wheeling Jesuit, it was a full-time job. So, once I did it, the first year, I mean, I couldn't really see myself going back to a finance job or an office job. I just kind of got the bug. So I was there for 9 years, and Jay DeFrugio, the head coach that hired me, actually went on to the NBA with the Indiana Pacers. And so a new coach had come, and he was also the athletic director. So he kept me on, which was nice. And so I never really, and it may sound dumb now, but I never really put two and two together thinking that I'd take over from my father at Hood. But as things may happen, he let me know that as he was taking over as the AD, because Gib Romaine, the previous AD, had left, and so he was going to have a full-time assistant because he was taking over that job. So asked me if I wanted it. I was actually talking to a couple of Division II schools for head jobs at the time. Had a couple of interviews, but I ended up deciding to come back to Hood, and he told me he probably had a few years left. So I knew the situation, and I knew that I'd more or less have to shoot myself in the foot and do something crazy to not be able to follow in his footsteps, because the president at the time, Ron Volpe, was very high. I mean, we had a good relationship, and I know that's what he wanted. And so it was kind of full circle. So now, after 2 years as an assistant, my father stepped down, and he's still athletic director now. So I took over, and it was nice because the 2 years I was here, he really gave me a lot of kind of leeway and freedom to recruit and run things that I wanted to, and that really helped because now we're taking over, and we got some guys that I recruited my first year, and it's been good. It's been really good. And that makes it easier, obviously. But it's been kind of a crazy situation. And looking back at it, it's just like, kind of common sense. Like, oh, of course, you're going to take it for your dad. People tell me all the time. And I'm just like, I never really thought of it like that. I never saw that coming. But everything fell where it fell. And, I'm very happy. I mean, it's a great college, great area. I'm back in my hometown, and it's going well. I think we got a good thing going, and hopefully we keep that up.
Talking to Chad Dickman here, head coach for the Hood Blazers. Team is having a tremendous season. Of course, they'd love to have it better. Last two games are losses, unfortunately. On December 30th, to Swarthmore in overtime, 72-63, and then just last night to Albright, 61-57. Albright, a bit of a surprise in the conference. I knew they would be improved. We invited them to the Hoopsville Classic. They're on top of the conference. What do you make of Albright this season? What do you make of the rest of the conference? Is this a surprising season?
Yeah, I was actually kind of wondering if I was going to get the axe after the last two games.
I'll take over. I got it. No, you just go sit down and watch how I do this.
But no, it was it was two good teams. I think Albright's very underrated. They've kind of had our number the last couple of years. When they come to play, they're tough to beat. They're well coached. And in the Swarthmore game, that was a rough one. Just because I thought we had the game won. We were up by 9 with less than 4 minutes left, and they made some big shots, and we had a couple possessions where we just kind of gave it away, and that would have been a nice signature win for us. Just because, as you mentioned earlier, we weren't looked upon very highly before the season, and we've kind of had a chip on our shoulder, and that's something we've kind of bulletin board material with the team. And that was a chance to kind of do something on a national, spotlight, and we had the game, and they just made more plays than us down at the end of the game. So that one was tough. And then up at Albright, I knew it was going to be a rough game. I think they're much better than the record right now, and I think they're 4-0 in the conference right now. So I'm sure you can ask Rick Ferry, their coach. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't expect to go undefeated.
No.
He knows that it's going to be a grind as well. And, as we previously talked about, anyone can beat anyone. So, it's honestly, if you told me 1 through 9 teams, if you told me, who was going to win the conference championship right now, nothing would surprise me. It's just one of those things where any team can get hot and every game's going to be close. So it's just a matter of, a couple bounces either way. So, it's taxing and it's for a coach, it's a rough couple months in the conference, but you got to come to play and you got to win the close games. And we've been fortunate, this year and the previous years that I've been a Hood, we won our fair share of close games.
Albright coach Rick Ferry. Maybe someone told him you were coming on the show. Might have had something to do with it. I don't know. Rick's a good man. We like Rick. We had him on at the Hoopsville Classic. Hey, tell me a little bit about your team. 3 seniors leading the way. Scott Boland, 14.5 points a game, 7 rebounds a game. Tanner Ruths, nearly 9 points a game, 2 rebounds a game. By the way, Boland nearly 3 assists a game, and Ruths 2 assists a game. They also get a couple of steals a game. Trevor Magnuski, the other senior, 8.5, 5.5 on the rebounds, as apparently we had some problems there. Coach, hopefully we can get him back there. We'll see if we
cut off.
Yeah, I see you, Coach. There he is. He's back. Magnuski, we were talking about again, playing pretty well too. Obviously senior laden, but tell us a little bit more than just the stat sheet tells me.
About Trevor Magnuski?
Well, about the team, the seniors and et cetera.
We have 3 seniors, 1 junior, and those guys have done a really good job kind of leading the way. They're not the most vocal guys, but they lead by example, and they kind of get guys in line behind them to kind of follow their path. So very, very important players. I mean, Scott Bowen is a very good player, and he usually fills the box score, but guys like Cheri Magnuski, Tanner, Ruths, Luke Casey, those guys just do so many things that don't show up in a box score that are important to our team. And, we have some good young guys, like some of our freshmen are going to be really good players. They haven't had a chance to kind of get out there and show what they can do yet. But a lot of it's just the mental. They're just, they're learning that the college game is not only a lot tougher athletically, but there's so much more thinking involved.
Yeah.
And there's so much more reading defenses and reading offenses, and that's where they're slowly coming along because talent-wise, our young guys are talented enough to help us out right now. But now it's just a matter of making that next step on the mental side, and obviously getting all the rotations and spacing and angles with our zone that we can be comfortable enough to put them in there for significant minutes. But overall, our team, we're very experienced. We've had some of our sophomores started most of the games last year as freshmen. So, the future's definitely bright. Losing those 3 seniors next year is definitely going to hurt, but we definitely have reinforcements ready. But, hopefully we're not really thinking about that this year. We're just trying to, milk this year for all it's worth while we have those 3 guys.
Well, Coach, I appreciate you taking the time to join us to talk about your squad. Obviously, I've had my eye on them. Off to a great start in the middle of what could be another fascinating Commonwealth connection race. I realize the internet's dropped, but you may be still able to hear us. If you get back, we got one more question for you. We'll see. Coach, we're working on it. Apparently, the internet just wants to act up. There, he's coming. We got him. Trust us. We'll get him back. If you're there, Coach, we'll just stall for a second here. There he is. It's all right. It happens to the best of us. Trust us. Before we let you go, we always give the coach the final word. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who may be tuning in?
We've had a lot of community support this year. The students have been great. The school's been kind of excited. We've had a couple teams on our campus that have had really strong years, so that's exciting. And as a team, as a school that's just had male students for 13 years. We're really trying to make a name for ourselves. We don't have that, traditional, name power that the Salisburys and the Catholics have. So, it's good to finally kind of put ourselves on the map in a couple sports. So, obviously men's basketball has been pretty strong. We're just trying to make that next step nationally. So we definitely appreciate the support from the community, and we appreciate everything you guys do for Division III basketball. I mean, it's the media, the stats, the website. When I was at the Division II level, my father always used to tell me, like, check out d3hoops.com. Whatever you need to know, you'll see there. And I was amazed at how much of an upgrade it was to the Division II national site. If there is even you'd have to go to a couple other small ones. They didn't have like a headquarters Division II basketball when I was there. I don't know if they do or not now, but it was such an upgrade at the D3 site where you could just get everything. I mean, stats, scores, schedules. So that I remember thinking to myself, like, man, that is a really nice promotional tool and marketing tool to have for Division III basketball. So, it's definitely great for us, and I know all the coaches and players in Division III appreciate it and all the work you do. So, thank you for that, and I appreciate you having me on your show.
Well, thank you, Coach. Appreciate the kind words as well. Good luck the rest of the season. We'll keep an eye on the Blazers and the MAC Commonwealth race, and we wish you nothing but the best.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Dave.
Absolutely. Chad Dickman joining us once again on the City of Salem Skype hotline. Team is, as we mentioned, having a pretty good season, but it's going to be a tough battle in that Commonwealth. They are 10-3 overall, 2-2. Albright is 4-0, but they're 6-7 overall. It's that kind of season in the MAC Commonwealth. It'll be fun to watch. Going to take a break. When we come back, we'll jump from Maryland to Washington State, Walla Walla, Washington, and Whitman, number 2 team in the country. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA and ABC studios. More Hoopsville when we return.
My name is Marcus Walker. I was All-State, won a state championship, a high school All-American, and played college and pro ball. I played because I love the game. I grind to be the best. I sweat because I put in work. I'm strong because I believe. When I want to bring it before game time, I come to the house that college basketball built, the CBE. No matter your skill, take it to another level. Elevate your game right here at the College Basketball Experience at Sprint Center.
I'm a Division III student athlete, and I know how powerful words can be. The term gay doesn't mean stupid, lame, or less than.
So I pledge to speak up if I hear the term gay used in a derogatory way or any other homophobic terms.
If you can play in Division III.
I'm a Division III student athlete, and my teammates unconditionally accepted me as part of their family. So now I pledge to do the same for others. If you can play in Division III.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at d3hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
Great moments are born from great opportunity. That's what you have here tonight. That's what you've earned here tonight. This is your time. Now go out there and take it.
And we're back. How about that? Technology. It works in amazing ways sometimes. Hope you're enjoying the show. I am Dave McHugh, your host from the WBCA and ABC studios. Just a reminder, we will circle back to the Stevens Point story here coming up. Also, we've got our brand new mailbag segment to come. We'll even have some emails that are unrelated to the mailbag. But, for example, we just got one about Stevens Point. We will have all that coming up. Plus, Alex Richard, former player for Stevens Point, who won a national championship in 2015. He will join us on the show. We'll ask him questions about what so far we have heard. Again, not from the NCAA, but from Stevens Point themselves. That's all coming up on what will definitely be an overtime show. In the meantime, let's keep talking about other things going on, and we talk about some surprises this season. I think everyone expected Whitman to be good this year. They got over the hump of beating Whitworth last year. Thanks in part in the NCAA tournament. They got in that large bid, which was their first NCAA tournament in program history, made a tremendous run to the Sweet 16. It was exciting to watch. But what were we going to see this year? Could they build on it? Build on it. Build on it they have. This team is certainly having a good season. They've got a win over Whitworth, which you may not think is a big deal. Trust me, it's a big deal in the Northwest. It's kind of like beating St. Thomas in the MIAC. It might be like beating Amherst in the NESCAC. It's beating the big dog who tends to control the show. They are 11-0, 2-0 in conference play, just getting over a win over Buena Vista. They have scored 100 points 4 times this season. Apparently they've got a good offense. They've also played a who's who of teams besides Whitworth. They've also played Texas Lutheran and Worcester. Played Marietta, beat Marietta by a point. What do we make of all this? Well, that's why we have the Skype hotline, as it were, and that's why we talk to coaches on the show. And joining us on the City of Salem Skype hotline is Eric Bridgeland, head coach for the number 2 Whitman men's basketball team, now known as the Blues. And Coach, no truth to the rumor you've been kicked down to the basement, right? This is by choice?
Yeah. No, of course it's by choice. I'm over here, and then I got the dog over there in the corner, eating dinner. So
whole new term for man cave, Coach.
Yeah, no question.
Literally a cave. No, seriously, 11-0. Yeah, I had you in my top 25 in the preseason. I said, okay, listen, they're going to build off of last year. I didn't expect to be putting you in my top 10 already. I didn't expect you to be sitting at number 2. And that's not disrespect. That's just saying you guys have made a giant leap forward.
Yeah, I don't know. Last year we really made an effort to go along with how the NCAA tournament committee thinks, to play the very best teams that we can. And each year is different. And it seemed like we had an opportunity to play, 6 tournament teams, in the preseason from last year. And we had a chance to get Worcester. That was a big deal. Texas Lutheran and St. Olaf's has always been good. And we made a deal that if we're going to make this tournament in Daytona, that we must play Marietta. Just to get out of our region and play some of the classic powers across the country. And as a staff, we were like, well, if we lose 2, 3, 4 games, as long as we're growing, that's a great thing. I don't think we ever thought that we would come through that unblemished. But it's a real compliment to our returners, and the guys that were a big part of our run last year have taken one game at a time and focused humbly on one game at a time, knowing that anybody could beat them, of course. And I'm taking those threats seriously.
You beat St. Olaf by 30 to start the season, 108-78. You beat Texas Lutheran by 16. You beat Whitworth by 14, though that game was a little closer in the second half. Whitworth, though, had to come from behind. You controlled much of it. Watched the Worcester game. I'll freely admit I wasn't blown away. I didn't get a chance to watch the Marietta game. It seems like you guys might be up and down, that you're still trying to gather what makes you good. Like the 30-point game against St. Olaf isn't necessarily the game I saw against Worcester.
Right. With us, we feel like we've got a bunch of different ways that we can win a game. And pressure is always involved, and running is always involved. And certain teams have better guard played than others, So it's not – there's been games like Worcester, we were very fortunate to win. They had 3 or 4 shots in the last 25 seconds to win the game. We missed 24 free throws in that game, So in play Marietta and we have a 5-point lead late, and then they get a 1-point lead off of a couple of turnovers. And so we've been pretty consistent with our effort and with showing up to play. And we've found ways to win those games, I'm not sure that we played poorly. We haven't been clicking on all cylinders yet. One of our best returners, Christian McDonald, who was an all-conference guy last year, had a knee surgery in April, and he's not been a big part of what's been happening on the floor yet, and he's getting better and better and better. So we're kind of doing it without him to this point, which no one ever thought that would happen. We think we have a very high ceiling, and we're not close to that yet. That's how we feel. So we feel very fortunate to be where we're at.
I saw you guys in person back in 2013, in December 2013, the 13-14 season at the D3Hoops.com Classic. You beat Superior, and then you had a heck of a game against Stevens Point, which you guys lost in overtime. But you had come off back-to-back 19-win seasons. You had been building, obviously, early in your tenure at at Whitman. And Whitworth obviously controlled the conference. You guys finished 16-10 that year and then broke out at 20-6 the following. So tell me, what's different about the program from the one I saw in Stevens Point in 2013, which seems to be the turning point, to now?
You know what's interesting is, knock on wood a whole bunch of times and do it for me, is each year we've had a season-ending injury to one of our top players. And even last year we broke through, but we lost our returning leading scorer in November to a torn Achilles.
Yeah.
Even in the game that you saw us when we played Stevens Point, we were missing Ben Eisenhart, who was a returning All-American that got concussed and was out 3 months in the middle of the year. So it hasn't. There was no way to, or it was tougher to gain momentum and really peak at the right time. I felt like. That season, we also had our senior point guard break his foot in a game in February, and he was the glue to everything. So it's maybe bad luck or just fortune, but I think we've just kind of made the most of what we had the last 2 or 3 years. And with a little luck, like you said, those 1-point games, or we had an overtime win last year against Cal Lutheran on a neutral floor that I thought was a huge win, and that might have gotten us into the tournament, So just lucky, maybe. I mean, I don't know.
Interesting enough, conference action, you kind of get back into it. As we mentioned, you already played Whitworth and Willamette earlier this season. You'll get back into the swing of things this weekend. Linfield and Pacific at home, followed by Pacific Lou and Puget Sound at home. So you'll have 4 straight home games before you'll get back on the road. Yep. Oddly or interestingly enough, you'll play your solo rematch against Whitworth right near the end of January with a ton of basketball left. So this is kind of a multi-pronged question. First and foremost, how do you now refocus on the conference and not overlook teams like Linfield and Pacific Lutheran when sitting on top?
Well, I don't think I know our entire staff is not overlooking anybody. We spend just as an even amount of time on every opponent that's on our schedule. So right now, we've been talking about Linfield all week long and not a word about Pacific. Although there's things we're doing in practice that would help prepare us for both games.
Sure.
But I don't think everyone on our team realizes that we could lose to anybody anywhere. Our alumni have a different idea. They think we're never going to lose a game, which is crazy. But it's so we're very grounded. I think we're having a ton of fun. We're just having fun, and we're trying to get better every day, like coaches say. But I don't think we're overlooking anybody. And we're not getting the feel from our players that we're overlooking anybody,
Well, and then the second part of that is you do play that Whitworth game on January 24th. It's not near the end of the season like it sometimes has been, or most times has been in the past. Can that be a double-edged sword? Can that be one of those, okay, listen, we got the other game coming up, we'll be focused, but then the whole rest of the season, you don't have that cherry or that carrot at the end of the season that's going to kind of have you, not focused, but, driving you a little bit?
I don't know. I don't know if we view Whitworth like that. This is the first year in a long time that we played them at home first. Usually it's always we play them there. So it was nice to play them at home first. It's the first time in 5 years or something like that. So that was nice. We're honestly not thinking about them at all. And I doubt they're thinking about us. There's so many other games of importance between now and then. Like starting tomorrow night, like Linfield is capable of beating anybody. So that's not even in my galaxy of thoughts. And I don't think our guys are thinking like that either. You would know this. We made it to the NCAAs the first time last year, and the bulk of our guys are back. and we don't have a senior, so we're a little bit young and we're a little bit squirrely at times. But there's a real swagger that comes from doing something that's never been done at a school, or just that you. And so our guys have that. They have that confidence of like, boy, if we work hard and we stay together, we could do it again, and then maybe we could even go farther. And that confidence, that swag, if we do things right, we can and will. That's a confidence that you just don't get by talking about it, like having actually done it. That was a big deal, and I think that really matured everybody by an extra year, it seemed, yeah.
Interesting enough, the third part of that question about the conference is the women's has been deep. It's been very deep. This year, maybe even deeper. At least 4 teams in the conversation, if not further. I look at the men's side, it's been top heavy. It's been Whitworth, and occasionally yourselves, or not occasionally yourselves. You're in the conversation far more than that. What I meant to say is occasionally there's somebody else besides yourself who's kind of made it on top and making a 2-horse race. I'm sensing a little bit, it may be a little bit deeper now that those other teams, George Fox is sitting on top of the conference despite a 5-7 record, but Puget Sound's 8-3. Linfield's an improved 7-4. Pacific 7-3, and granted, a lot of these games against teams we can't really appreciate, but is this conference doing what the women have already done and starting to develop some depth to make it more competitive and maybe even help you guys out?
I don't think on the men's side it's even close to where it's at on the women's side.
Of course not. No.
On the women's side, there's always 3 teams there in the top 25, and they're nationally known, and there's multiple champions from our conference, nationally. So, but our staff feels that this is the most parity and the deepest that the conference has been in some time. So we feel like we could lose to anybody in it. There's so many good teams, like you just finished rattling off. Like Whitworth's had such a stranglehold. We were just talking about it last night. In their last 57 games, they're 54-3, and their 3 losses are against us. They haven't lost another game to anybody except for one tournament game 2 years ago.
Yep.
So they're still dominant, and until someone knocks them off, truly knocks them off, within the conference, I don't think you can really replace them. We would like to think that we're making a case for it now, game by game. I don't know that there's a consistent third team yet that you could rival the women's side.
Sure.
Yeah. They're just, but they're good, but I wouldn't say that they're great, on a national scale. Like Ryman or Ripon, I apologize on butchering their pronunciation.
It's Ripon.
Yeah, they're so good, and they came in and they had just a battle with Pacific the other night, and it would have been nice to pull that one out for our conference,
Yeah.
So until we start winning some of those bouts with more teams than just Whitman and Whitworth and us, I don't think we can make that claim yet.
Real quick about your team, you're number 2 ranked in the D3Hoops.com poll. You're led by Tim Howell, 20 points a game, 2.5 rebounds a game, 2 assists a game, and shooting 47% from the floor and 46% from beyond the arc. You got Joey Hewitt, nearly 12 points a game, a 94% free throw shooter, 3.5 rebounds a game. You got Jace Harrison, 11 points a game, 11 points a game from Jack Stewart. 4 guys in double figures there. And then when you look at the rebounding total, Hewitt's at 4.1. Otherwise, 5.1 from Austin Butler. Otherwise, nothing jumps out at me. It's a pretty even team in many ways.
Yeah, we're very, very deep, and we're very, very deep with guys that played a hand and had a hand in our run last year, and they're just a year older. We're just deep and versatile, Like it seems like we play Worcester and we're not playing well and can't hit a free throw. We can't separate. And, Jace Harrison has 27, and he's averaging 11. And then we're playing Covenant and we're in trouble. But Joey Hewitt has 28, like it seems like a different person can step up each night with something that's pretty special, If you look at the numbers, we do have a +9, +10 turnover differential, which is a lot. And we have a style of play where we are running and put tremendous pressure on you in your transition defense. And there's a bunch of guys that can make plays in there, not necessarily just scoring, but like making the extra pass and doing that. And there's not one inkling of selfishness. All the guys want to do is have fun and enjoy winning together. I think that's probably our biggest weapon right there.
Okay, so trick question. Are you fairly the number 2 team in the country, and how do you keep your team focused on the task without getting wrapped up in being the number 2 team in the country?
We've never talked about that, so I'm sure that they're aware of it, but it's never come,
sure.
From our state. Yeah, and I say that tongue in cheek. We knew, like we talk about Marietta and like getting ready to play them, we tried to play as tough a schedule as we possibly can with teams that were in the tournament last year, and even Covenant. We had one heck of a battle with them, and they won their conference last year and got in and all that. And so we don't know. I mean, I don't know. I look at the teams that were playing and go, Marietta just beat Muskingum, or if I'm pronouncing them right, by 45 or 50, and they were good. So it's. I don't know. I think it depends on the matchup between teams. I know that we have a lot more golf to play, and we are focusing on one opponent at a time. And then when your wonderful show comes up, in March, hopefully we've got an automatic with having won the Northwest Conference, or we get an at-large. But until then, it's weekly, one game at a time, and all the rest of that stuff. I think our guys are doing a pretty good job of focusing at a challenge at hand, and not what a ranking is or when we're playing Whitworth next. Those things. We're working hard at not even thinking about that, and I think that's been pretty easy not to think about that. I think.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, somewhat easy, right? I appreciate you taking the time. This is a fascinating season to me. Again, I had you in my top 25. I think I had you in my top 15, if I remember, in the preseason. It's just an amazing run you're on right now. I'm fascinated to see it play on. I am luckily stay up late at night so I can catch a few games here and there. So hopefully we can get you back to the D3Hoops.com Classic or the Hoopsville Classic in the future. Otherwise, as always, I give the coach the final word. Any final thoughts you want to give to those who may be tuning in?
I'm going to sound like a broken record if anyone's ever listened. You guys are awesome. You give us the greatest coverage, and you make our student athletes at our level feel so special day in, day out with the website, and then Hoopsville, and the way you go about your work really brings so much to the Division III level. And it's important that everyone knows how special you guys are. So thank you for all your work and having me on. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Coach. Good luck the rest of the season. I look forward to seeing you play out. Hopefully we're talking in March. How about that?
Would love it. That's the plan.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. Take care.
All right, Dave. See you.
Eric Bridgeland joining us again from Walla Walla, Washington. The team is 11-0, 2-0 in conference play. They'll take on Linfield and Pacific in conference action coming up this weekend. Looking forward to seeing how that plays out. Going to take another break. We're heading into overtime. We have a couple things to take care of. First, the mailbag. And second of all, a talk with Alec Richard. Actually, we'll probably talk to Alec Richard first, and then we'll handle the mailbag to wrap up the show. Former Stevens Point player, looking forward to his take on what has come out of Stevens Point today and so far. Maybe he can shed some insight on what's going on. We'll find out. You're listening to Hoops Hope, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA and ABC studios. When we come back, like I said, Eric Richard chats about his former head coach and team. You're listening to Hoopsville. Back with more in a moment.
I used to never really talk. Ever. I was afraid if I said something wrong, everyone would laugh at me. But then I started to play golf with Special Olympics. It helped me to find my voice. And now everyone else is speechless.
This is why we love sports. It's in the way they play, free from the pressures and all the money talk. Playing for simply the love of the game, where everyone has a shot at their definition of success on and off the field. This is what we love about sports, and what we can still love about college sports.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at d3hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
We are calling you, all of you. We are calling all Division III schools to join our cause.
It's on us to start the change. It's on us to be the change. It's on us. It's on Division III. It's on all of us to stop sexual assault.
And welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the show. If you got questions for us while we're on the air, or even when we're off the air, you can always email us, hoopsville at d3hoops.com. That's hoopsville at d3hoops.com. You can also tweet us at d3hoops or hashtag Hoopsville. Plenty have done that today. You can join us on Facebook, facebook.com/Hoopsville as well. Let's go back to the Stevens Point story, which we started off the top. We mentioned we're going to have a mailbag segment. We will. This is a little bit of a teaser of that, though we have not actually talked about or shown you the mailbag, but this is an email per Stevens Point. It's from Matthew. He writes, Bob Semling is a class act. I have coached against him for years. He's always prided himself in running a top-shelf program. I can say that several other institutions in the country have done exactly what happened to Stevens Point without knowing that a violation was happening. I look forward to the truth being told without rumor and speculation. Rumors can ruin a coach and a program, so please do all you can to know the truth before broadcasting anything regarding Bob's program, his players, and his coaches. I will say this first and foremost. Nothing we have said here on this program has been a rumor or speculation. Everything we have said on this program has either come from Stevens Point themselves or people we have talked to themselves. When we got the information today from Stevens Point, we have read verbatim what Stevens Point has said about that. I have had conversations with people close to Stevens Point and reported that stuff accurately. So we're not spreading rumor and we're not speculating on anything. I have absolutely no idea what specifically Stevens Point has been targeted by the NCAA as to have violated, except for what Stevens Point has reported today. That's not rumor and that's not speculation. That is directly from a media release from Stevens Point. Same thing happened with the reporter earlier. He did report that he has a feeling that Bob Semling is done. He is basing that on his professional judgment, and he's basing that on what he is seeing going on and what we know has happened in the past in these situations. We know that Bob Semling has been told to not be anywhere near the program, to not be involved in practices, to not show up at games. That is a fact. What does this all mean? We don't know. We can say that a former player has agreed to come on our show. Alex Richard, we've been calling him Richard all day. I felt like being fancy, I guess. Alex Richard played on that 2015 national championship team, and he joins us on the City of Salem Skype, or non-Skype, City of Salem hotline. Alex, thank you for joining me and taking the time.
Yep, thank you for having me.
First and foremost, your reaction to what the news was when you saw it first today.
Initially it was pretty shocking. Being a player for 4 years under Coach Semling, and I'll say we a lot. I refer to former players that played with me for my 4-year career at Stevens Point. Just very shocking, disappointing to hear such a bad thing come about for a great coach, a coach who's meant so much to me personally and has had such a big part in shaping in the way my life is today. So just very disappointed to hear the news that came about so abruptly.
When you look at the allegations, and I'm going to ask you some specifics in a minute, so we don't have to get into specifics now, but you look at the allegations, and we're getting them straight from Stevens Point, who's clearly getting them from the NCAA's investigation.
Yep.
How does it compare to what you were under the impression prior to? Obviously, I think this revolves around your senior year is where we thought this started. It's obviously a larger set of years than that. But how's it compared to what you were under the impression they were being looked at in the first place?
Well, Dave, just to clear things up, I want to definitely clarify that the term allegation does still mean that there is need to be proven. So that term doesn't mean that nothing has been proven yet. They're obviously just statements that have been created by the university. And obviously UWSP released those allegations. But, me as a former player and, former players I've played with, we definitely want to state right off the bat that we disagree with those allegations. And we disagree strongly with the punishment that the University of Stevens Point has laid down on Coach Semling. We disagree strongly. We think it is far too severe. And again, like I said, those allegations, they haven't been proven yet. They've just been stated by the university.
Well, let me ask you this as I finish something. I apologize. I'm writing something to make sure people realize that you're able to be heard on the show. Let me ask you this. The allegations are obviously coming from the investigation that the NCAA is doing. We're not assuming, you're not under any belief that the school is making up any of those allegations, are you? Or do you think there's anything that has been said that is not coming from potentially the investigation that's underway?
Not necessarily. I just very strongly disagree with the allegations that have been listed, the terming and wording they use. Being a player that's played 4 years, there was never, and I know this term has been thrown around in the media, which is very classic of situations like this. The media often misconstrues information. There was never practices that were held out of season, and that needs to be stated straight up. And that is nothing but the truth. Never once was a practice held before October 15th, the start date of all Division III practices. Open gyms were held, and those were player-led open gyms. Just as any good Division III program, whether it's football, volleyball, soccer, they hold open gyms, which are led by the players. So I just want to state right there that there was never once a practice held that gave UWSP an unfair advantage.
Okay, let me ask you then about that. And just based strictly from what I'm reading from Stevens Point today, which has got wording that I've read a million times from the NCAA. The first allegation, it's alleged in that 5-year period, the men's basketball coaching staff, not just Coach Semling, impermissibly directed, observed, and engaged in men's basketball student athletes and athletic-related activities outside the institution's declared practice season. So let's take, for example, an open get-together. I'm a former student athlete. I know exactly what those are like. I played soccer at a college. I know when we got together in the old gym and practiced during the off-season. I know exactly what they're like. You guys get together as a team. Are you saying never in your 4 years there did Coach Semling, Coach Dernbach, or somebody else either walk through those practices, stop, watch you guys, or even direct you in any way at any one of those open gyms?
I decline to comment on that issue.
But that's where, okay, so Alex, understand that that's where this is coming from. The media says practices, they're being generic, yes. But that's, that's right there.
There's a huge difference between practice and open gyms, though. That's what the media understand.
Alex, I don't disagree with you. There's a difference between a practice that's been organized by a head coach, but the allegation isn't that. The allegation is that the coaching staff participated in your open gym. The second allegation is that those same instances, 16 times, a prospective student athlete or recruit participated in a practice with the team, whether it be open gym or more formal practice. Do you remember any time a recruit or a prospective student athlete participated in an open gym or practice with your team?
No, I do not. That is incorrect.
So you don't remember any time, even yourself, for example, being recruited by Stevens Point, because this, for argument's sake, this window, I believe, may encompass you being a senior. I could be dead wrong on that in high school. But you didn't participate in a practice when you came to a school visit, and you don't remember any prospective student participating in a practice or an open gym with you guys during your 4 years there.
Correct. That never happened.
Okay. The third allegation gets a little complicated. I really don't have a question for you because it talks about Coach Semling not demonstrating an atmosphere of compliance. That's a little complicated for student athletes to understand. I don't want to get you into that one. And then the other one basically talks about failure to adequately monitor the team, which also gets a little bit complicated. But it gets back to the fact that you had open gyms. You guys can form your own practices, perfectly legal. The other complaint that we have heard, and it's been reported by other media outlets, is that sometimes when you guys would get together in an open gym, nobody else was allowed to use the gym. Is that a factual statement, or is that also maybe a little bit misleading?
That is very misleading. I'm not sure what that all entails and how that statement. And again, that's what I kind of mentioned earlier. You know, when allegations come out like this, obviously there's plenty of media outlets who are looking to get their coverage, and you know, a lot can be lost in translation how these allegations are presented to the media in different forms, different outlets. I think there's a lot of misinformation and misleading statements that have been leaked.
Obviously, this comes from an anonymous tip. We don't know where that tip came from. It is not that uncommon in the NCAA about anonymous tips. It's the same thing that brought the investigation for Thomas More. It's brought down some other investigations as well. I think the Keene case in women's basketball was an example of an anonymous tip as well. In those reports, again, we're still waiting for the NCAA to come out. They say that these open gym scenarios where you guys were practicing, nobody else participated in the open gym because it was under the belief that the gym was closed or they couldn't participate with you. Do you remember any time that you guys were having an open practice as a team, by yourselves, whatever, where anybody else wanted to use the gym and were not allowed?
No, that never happened.
Okay. And again, I want to repeat two because they're important. The first one is you also do not remember a recruit at any time participating in a practice or a shoot around or whatever with anybody on the team to the best of your recollection.
Correct.
Okay. And the other one, I know you said decline to comment, but I want to make sure I asked the right question and it's correct. At any time in those open gyms or those scrimmages that were conducted by the team themselves, by the players themselves, I should say, by the players themselves, outside of the permissible dates, meaning before October 15th, the end of the season, which you're familiar with, your no comment is that, or I should say, let me phrase that. My question to you is, do you remember a coach, an assistant coach, anybody who stopped in, watched, who took notes, or guided you in those practices?
Yeah, again, I have no comment on that issue.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that everybody heard it correctly. I don't want someone to go back and misrepresent anything that I said or you said either. So the question to you is, are you concerned that maybe there is some fire where there is smoke, considering Coach Semling has been suspended by the school for 13 games, which is a large number. I don't know if it's the highest in Division III, but it's a large number. And the fact that Coach Dernbach has taken over the program and that we still even haven't heard from the NCAA officially. Are you worried maybe there's something bigger here that you didn't realize was going on?
No, I guess just to clarify again, we're waiting just to say that we disagree with the allegations that have come out initially, and we hope, as former players and myself, when the NCAA does give their final ruling, that they look more deeply and clearly into this issue. But initially, we disagree with the allegations and sanctions that UWSP has imposed, and we hope that there's more clarity to this issue once the NCAA makes its final ruling.
Let me ask you another interesting question. It has come up, a couple of your teammates have mentioned it, that certain things were allowed because the athletic director at the time, Montgomery, if I remember correctly, said it was okay. Now, I don't know where they heard that. I don't know if a coach told them that the AD said it was okay. Whatever the case may be, he's no longer there. He's at another institution. Do you remember ever a time where there was a question about what you guys were doing where you were told that the AD said it was okay to do?
Again, I declined to comment on that issue.
Okay. At any point during your 4 years, was there ever a concern that maybe you guys had done something wrong? I know that's a really odd and wide open question, but did you ever feel that at some point, or was there a conversation like, oh no, we shouldn't have done that, or that wasn't allowed, or someone had a conversation about the fact that we have to be careful not to do X, Y, or Z?
Absolutely not.
Okay. I'm honestly curious. We have not heard from the NCAA officially from them. This is one of those rare times that I've seen a school double self-impose themselves. So I'm trying to get as much information as I possibly can, and I appreciate you coming on the show. I don't know if I've got anything else I can really ask you, considering there's plenty we don't know, as you point out, from the NCAA. We're basing this all on what Stevens Point had to say. But per anything I've asked you or anything else you've heard, is there anything else you want to say per yourself and the team? Obviously, right now we haven't vacated wins. We haven't vacated a national title or anything like that.
Yep.
Actually, before I get to that, are you worried they may vacate that national title considering what happened to Thomas More?
I can't comment on that issue.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
By the way, has an NCAA investigation asked you questions? Have they brought you and the team in for questioning as to what happened?
I have not been questioned personally, no.
Interesting. Okay. Do you know of any other teammates who have?
I decline to comment on that issue.
Okay. And finally, any other thoughts you want to get out there about this case? Obviously, under the premise that we all don't know the official ruling from the NCAA, and we don't know where we're going to find out tomorrow. We're going to find out in March or whenever we're going to find out.
Yeah, just kind of as I mentioned earlier, put clarity on what allegation means. They're still looking for proof. It's a statement that's been made that hasn't been proven yet. And again, former players, myself included, we disagree with UWSP. There's sanctions they've imposed. We feel that they're far too strict for what happened. We hope that the NCAA brings clarity. Just what I mentioned earlier, there was never once a practice held out of season. I know the media makes it seem that we had an unfair advantage, and the reason we won the 2015 national title, and it's not true. We had a great team. We went on a tremendous run, led by 6 players that didn't give up, 60 points in 6 straight games and pretty much a cakewalk to the national championship. And that was not because of an unfair advantage or cheating, and that needs to be stated, and everybody needs to know that. So again, these are allegations, and we disagree with UWSP's penalty. We hope clarity will be brought to this issue by the NCAA.
Alex, I appreciate you coming on. One thing I will say, remember, I'm media as well, and I haven't made any of those allegations.
I appreciate that, Dave.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you guys don't group everybody in. There may be some who may say that, but I certainly haven't alluded that you guys won a national championship because of illegal practices or anything alike. So I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. Thank you for taking the time for coming on. I really do appreciate that. Good luck.
Yep,
by the way, what are you
having
doing?
me.
What are you doing these days?
I live in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. I'm
Wow.
a graduate assistant strength and conditioning coach at Southern Mississippi University. So I'm a long ways from home right now, but I've definitely been in contact with plenty of former players who are in Wisconsin right now.
Sure.
So far away.
As close as you are to Louisiana, maybe Richard is a better way of saying your last name.
It might be. Yeah, there's a little different lingo down here.
Absolutely. Hey, well, congratulations on the career. Thank you very much for taking the time. We'll look forward to seeing how this all plays out and stay in touch. Do you mind?
Yep, you bet. Thank you very much for having me.
Alex Richard joining us from the 2015 National Championship Stevens Point team. Again, no comment to whether coaching staff impermissibly directed, observed, and engaged in the men's basketball student athletes while they were practicing or playing, let's call it playing on their own team organized or play organized occasions. Said he does not remember seeing a prospective student athlete, aka a recruit, ever participate with student athletes in period. That, by the way, also occurs with regular practices. And then 3 and 4, those allegations about Bob Semling demonstrating atmospheric compliance, or the 4th allegation of failing to adequately monitor the men's basketball program. Those are a little bit too complex. And as a former student athlete, I wouldn't be able to give you an answer to that if I were to ever asked about my former head coach. I do appreciate Alex coming on the show. I want to point out again, previous email and per what Alex said, we have never alluded to anything along the lines of whether these impermissible practices, if they are found to be true by the NCAA, led to that national championship. Just as I have said about Thomas More, I don't believe that allowing Sidney Moss to stay at an former assistant or current assistant coach at the time, former assistant coach overall house to recover from major knee surgery had anything to do with leading them to a national championship either. There's way too many complicated things involved to ever assume such a thing. Does Stevens Point lose their national title in this case? I don't know. But if I'm going based on what Thomas Moore's case says, I think there's a real chance that this could be a problem. Could they vacate some wins? Maybe. I don't know. Practices gets a little complicated. Whether they deem them to be illegal practices, I don't know. Here's what I do know. Stevens Point has clearly been talking to the NCAA in the investigation. Here's their press release. We have it on d3hoops.com. Here's what I know about this. They have 4 allegations here that are written as if they're straight out of an NCAA investigative report. The wording is exactly what you would read in the Thomas More case. It's exactly what you would read in the Baruch case. It's exactly the wording you would read in the Canes case. It's NCAA speak. Based on that, I suspect they're getting this straight from the NCAA, and the NCAA is warning them as to what they have found already, which means the NCAA's case is all but wrapped up. I would argue maybe what is left to do is for the NCAA to determine what the punishment will be. And Stevens Point, as an institution and as an academic or athletic program, what they have done with this report and these punishments is get ahead of those punishments coming. Remember, Stevens Point has said this was minor for a number of months. I've heard that on the record, and I've heard that off the record. This has become major. 4 violations that they are alluding to. As an institution, we feel that it is imperative to take swift and immediate action to response to what we have been informed by the NCAA are major allegations regarding our men's basketball program. The investigation's been going on for some time, and they've got at least 4 major notes here of concern if you're a Stevens Point fan. What does this mean down the road? I don't know. Bob Semling's been suspended. He's not been fired. Does not mean he won't come back if the NCAA investigation comes out later. Doesn't mean the NCAA doesn't say, nope, that's fine. Good job. We're going to leave your punishments as they are. And it also doesn't mean the NCAA doesn't come back and say, we see your punishments and we raise you this. I will be interested to see how this plays out. I'm not really sure what to make of it. I'll say one thing about it, though. This and the Thomas More case are minor to the Baruch case. And Baruch, in my opinion, has gotten off light. Even by self-imposed standards, they have gotten off light. And I will stick to this Baruch case until people understand that. The Baruch case is gross misconduct. I don't know if Stevens Point is gross misconduct because I want to see the NCAA report. I know Thomas More was not gross misconduct. But I am interested that maybe with Stevens Point's actions here, we're seeing a sign from the NCAA on the Division III level of an increase to crack down on some of these things. My only theory is that there are so many cases in point, and they point to 16 times recruits were practicing with teams in these allegations, 16 times, that there were so many of them that they don't fall under a hand slap anymore, that it was purposeful dodging. And I will also say this. There have been many occasions I have heard rumor and speculation of another program somewhere in the country, and I don't mean just one, I mean programs everywhere, that have violated some of these rules. Sometime off the record, if you get me having a few drinks, I'll tell you about one that's pretty famous. I'm kidding. I would never tell you. But this isn't the first time I've heard of these things. It is the first time that the investigation has either been reported by an anonymous tip or somebody else and gone anywhere. The other ones never went anywhere because no one investigated. That's a whole nother conversation. All right, let's move on. Before we end the show, we did get some emails and mailbag questions, and I want to get to those because it is our news segment. And we'll start with the first question. And let's see here. Oh, we can keep that up. So this is the Hoopsville mailbag. It's brand new, especially for any of you who might be listening to the podcast of our show. It gives you a chance to ask us questions. Send them in via email, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. We will try and get them to you. Our first question says, awesome new segment. Well, thank you. Longtime listener, and I always enjoy the show. Do you think a team status gets influenced or damaged when they make a or I may have miswritten some of this. Let's read it straight from the individual. The individual is Ralph from the Eastern Shore. Eastern Shore, by the way, is in Maryland. It says, awesome news segment, long-time listener, always enjoy the show. Do you think a team status gets influenced or damaged when they make big jumps or falls in the D3Hoops.com top 25? This person goes on to say, example, men's basketball team at Salisbury. The Seagulls started their season unranked, then worked up to number 5, and now at 15. They've been all over the map in a few weeks. Good or bad for the Seagulls? I think it's good. Being a top 25 team means you're a top 25 team. If it's a short whiz-bam-boom moment, yeah, it may not look great. But for Salisbury, I think it's good. They're into the top 25. Were they a little bit too high at 5? Yeah, probably. But in this age of parity, you got to fill in the holes somewhere. And Salisbury with some big wins, including one over Christopher Newport, made a nice jump. I didn't get them higher than number 9. I took a buzzer beater at midcourt at home against CNU and didn't blow it out of proportion. Maybe some other voters did. I don't think it's bad to be jumping up and down the top 25. I think what would be bad is Salisbury's 2 losses at St. Thomas, or at the Hoopsville Classic, steamrolled out of there, out of control, and they kept losing. If they kept losing and they disappear and they don't make the NCAA tournament, or they're not a factor in the CAC, then it's bad. But let's take a quick look. They were playing tonight. They are currently beating Mary Washington 77-68 on the road with 20 seconds left to go in the game. We would assume Salisbury will win. So no, I don't think it's all that bad. Let's take another look at another question that came in. This one says, from Stacy in Ohio, can you rank men's and women's regions currently in order by strength of that region and how they may do come NCAA tournament selection time? Well, that's a little bit challenging. I'll freely admit I didn't do enough research ahead of time to rank these officially. Ahead of time, I should have looked at these questions a little bit sooner and done some research. But let's go off the top of my head. Maybe we'll just go with the top 4. We'll start on the women's side. I think the strongest region on the women's side, and has been for a while, is the Central region. I know we don't necessarily have a ton of top 25 teams that come out of that region necessarily, but it has the most depth with the WIAC and, of course, the CCIW. St. Thomas is knocking on the door there. I think the other one is the Great Lakes. I think the Great Lakes is stout. By the way, back to the Central region, don't forget about Wash U in Chicago, along with the CCIW and the WIAC. I think the Great Lakes, when it comes down to it, I mean, you got Thomas More. Obviously, you have Hope. You got Carnegie Mellon. You've got plenty of other teams that are in the mix there. Ohio Northern, we talked about. Baldwin Wallace, DePaul, et cetera. I think Great Lakes is number 2, though you could make a definite argument that they're number 1 now. I think number 3 would probably be the Northeast. Tufts and Amherst certainly are on top there. The problem with the Northeast is there tends to be a steep drop-off after the top group on the women's side. But when Tufts and Amherst are leading the way on the women's side, I think the Northeast is certainly a formidable foe. And then the 4th one, I think, kind of gets up in the air a little bit. You could argue maybe Atlantic with the way the NJAC is played. You could argue the Mid-Atlantic, certainly, with the likes of Scranton. The Landmark race is going to be fun to watch. The CAC race is going to be fun to watch. So I think that one's a little bit more wide open. Certainly, maybe you could make a case for the East, though I don't think the East is as strong as the Mid-Atlantic. I don't think the South is as strong. And the West is certainly strong with the Northwest. And the IAC's got a couple good teams, but you have a steep drop-off when you get to the SCIAC. And the MIAC's good, but not great. So off the top of my head, at least the top 3 conferences on the women's side, I would go off the top of my head Central, Great Lakes, Northeast, with Mid-Atlantic maybe being number 4. But you could certainly make an argument on that. On the men's side of things, I think the top region would still be the Central. I think you could make arguments for a lot of different places on this one, but I would go Central on that one. I think number 2 would be Great Lakes because I think the depth is there in the Great Lakes. We don't have as many top teams as we have had in the past, but the Great Lakes has certainly been pretty darn good. I think number 3, again, would also be the Northeast. The likes of Babson and Amherst. The NESCAC has gotten deeper and has certainly been a lot more interesting. Number 4 gets more interesting. I think I'm going to go with the South. You got a lot of good teams in the ODAC, even though the ODAC's a bit down this year and has been for the last 2 years. I think the ASC has proven to have some good teams in it as well. Yes, you could make an argument for the Mid-Atlantic. I think the Mid-Atlantic might be one of the deepest, and really maybe I'm underselling the Mid-Atlantic there, and maybe they should be number 4. And I could certainly make that argument. The only problem with the Mid-Atlantic is the top never seems to do as well as I'd like it to. The top of the Landmark doesn't tend to go very far. Top of the Mac Commonwealth doesn't tend to go very far. Top of the CAC has had some representatives, and it's nice to see. But I need some more depth at that top to go further in the tournament. So that's just off the top of my head. The question did go on, how do you see that may come down to tournament selection time? I think we see that a lot. We see a lot of the extra bids coming out of the Central, Great Lakes, Northeast. In the recent years, the Mid-Atlantic's gotten a couple extra bids. I think that's where we see it. The South's gotten a couple extra bids. That's usually where you see the strength of a region. Third question that we got, what do you think has played the best? Who do you think played the best non-conference men's basketball schedule this year? One would think Marietta has to be near the top of the list. Who else has challenged themselves for before conference time? This is coming from Frank in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Says, good on the Pioneers for challenging themselves outside the OAC. Hopefully those teams get rewarded in March. Yeah, I think Marietta's got definitely one of the best out-of-conference schedules. I think another one to look at would be, interestingly enough, Stevens Point. Despite the fact they're not doing so well, they're 6-5. It may not really be a conversation factor later, but Stevens Point has had a who's who of teams to play, and of course won't be a factor at all at this point. Whitman has certainly played some good teams. We mentioned it in the chat with Coach Bridgeland. St. Olaf is despite maybe not being as good as they have been, is certainly a solid schedule maker for them. Obviously playing Worcester and playing some others, Marietta especially. I think Whitman's in that conversation. And they will get rewarded. As long as a team doesn't take too many losses, they will be rewarded. And that's nothing to shake a stick at. You schedule well and you win a good majority of those games, you will be rewarded even in an at-large bid. You schedule well and you don't win. Stevens Point, if they weren't suspended from the postseason right now, would be a great example of where Stevens Point could sneak into a bid because they have such an amazing out-of-conference schedule. But again, at 6-5, they would have to win a lot more games if they were eligible to become a Pool C bid. At 6-5, Stevens Point isn't necessarily in that conversation. And we got another question. I got to find it. Pardon me. It was in here a moment ago. Here we go. Yep, here we go. So, this one's a little bit more complicated. I will do my best with this one. I can't make you any promises. This one comes from Rob. It says, if Governor Cuomo gets his way, do you see, one, the SUNYAC and CUNYAC becoming one of the most competitive conferences in the country for all sports, not only basketball? And two, does SUNY schools in the Skyline Conference get kicked out for obvious competitive advantage? If no one's aware, Governor Cuomo has decided, along with some, to basically, and I don't know all the details, but he's pushing through a plan for tuition-free at state schools in New York State. I don't know all the details, so I don't want to speak too far on this. But could there be a competitive advantage? Yeah, but let's point out the fact that there's already technically a competitive advantage for state schools to begin with. They're already cheaper than most private schools. Now, most will point out at a private school, when you account the discount and scholarships and grants and all kinds of other money, that student athletes could go to a private school for about the same amount as they go to a state school. Let's also remember the fact that state schools, the only way you can take advantage of those opportunities is if you are in state. So if you ever see a student from out of state playing on a state school, remember they're paying pretty high, exorbitant price, about as high as much a private school would cost. Case in point, I remember when I was in college, this was back in the 90s, my sister was going to the University of Southern California. I was going to Goucher College. My brother was at the prep school he and I participated in or went to up in New England. Goucher was the cheapest of the three. USC was the most expensive because my sister was out of state. So, yes, I think Governor Cuomo's situation is interesting. I think it certainly will be an interesting thing to follow for the SUNYAC and CUNYAC schools. The thing is, the student athlete still has to be interested in going to those schools and taking on what they offer. And I'm not so sure that that's always a slam dunk. I know in the state of Maryland, for example, they have a board basically in place that makes sure that schools don't cross-pollinate in terms of education. If Goucher College wants to add a particular major, they're going to make sure that that major isn't identical at any other school outside of the grandfather clauses. That waters down the education, as it were. They want schools to be unique. So in some cases, you could argue here that the state schools may or may not offer what those private schools are also offering, and whether those students would be interested in going to a state school. On paper, sure, it could be very interesting, could be a competitive swing of things, but I don't think grossly any more than they are now. And I definitely don't think the CUNYAC does not tend to spend a lot of money on athletics. You talk to a lot of CUNYAC coaches and they're frustrated by how much they can't travel. And thus they're kind of restricted in their area, and thus they don't get a lot of good opponents for out-of-conference games. SUNYAC certainly travels more, and I think they might be a little bit more interested in doing things. As far as the part of the question that says SUNY schools in the Skyline getting kicked out for competitive advantage, they'd already be kicked out. Maybe there's an outside chance, but here's the thing, and here's where the crux of this comes down to, in my opinion. State schools are still in the conversation whether they're in the conference or not. So Goucher and Catholic, which I'm most familiar with, were in the Capital Athletic Conference. They were in state schools with like Frostburg and Salisbury and St. Mary's, which is, by the way, an honors college, which is more expensive than Salisbury, and some others that were state schools. They left because they felt this competitive advantage. They want to be with like-minded institutions. Are you telling me that Goucher and Catholic are still not recruiting the same players as Salisbury, St. Mary's, and Frostburg? They didn't leave the geographic area, did they? So yeah, the E8 could kick those SUNY schools out, but why? Where would it get them? And by the way, here's the other crux of it. And give me a quick second here, because there's another little quirk with the E8. The Empire 8 is in trouble in cases of losing its automatic bid when it comes to football. They've got a couple SUNY schools in their football program, right? You got Cortland, Buffalo State. You've got others in there, Brockport. You kick them out. You bury them, or is it the Liberty? Maybe I got this backwards. Pat's probably screaming at me right now. I want to make sure I have that right. Hold on. Well, but either way, okay. Maybe it's a Liberty, and I apologize because it's Liberty. Liberty's the one who's going to be in trouble with the AQ here soon. But the E8 kicks out the SUNY schools. Now they're in AQ trouble. It's a double-edged sword. Yeah, you could make an argument for competitive disadvantage, but I would also make an argument that competitive disadvantage already exists, but you don't want to put the AQs at risk. E8's got to go out there and find somebody else to replace those schools that they kick out, right? No, I don't think that's going to happen in the E8. I think there's way too much going on. Now, SUNY schools could leave on their own for varying reasons, but I just don't see it happening. I'm trying to make sure if there's others out there. What's going on? Justin Sweeney writes, I'll figure out what he's writing to me later. I'm trying to make sure there's nothing else going on. Number 15, Salisbury finishes off Mary Washington, winning 78-70, as we pointed out earlier. That's a good win for them. Congratulations. Daryl Duncan on our YouTube page says, Happy New Year. Dave, I hope you had a good, happy holiday season. Get any rest? I did not. I am still tired, especially from Vegas, but Salem combined as well. I'm trying to see if there's anything else out there that we may have missed. If you got any questions for us, again, about the mailbag, we really appreciate you taking the time. Per the mailbag, email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com, and we will answer your questions here on the air. We'll get a better graphic, but we'll answer your questions. Of course, many people watch this show on the podcast, so download the podcast, enjoy the podcast, and we hope you'll take the time to email us as well. We are well past overtime, and we have gots to go. We will continue to cover the Stevens Point story. Again, we said at the beginning of the show, if we get an opportunity, whether we hear from somebody at Stevens Point who would like to discuss things going on or whatnot, we will bring that, even if it is separate of any show. We will get that interview for you and get it up on the air. I do want to thank those who took the time to join us this evening on the show. First and foremost, and we said Daley Ryman. I got that wrong on the thing. We'll have to edit that. And sports director at NewsChannel 7 WSAW. Also, Cheri Harrer, the women's basketball coach at Baldwin Wallace. Scott Hemmer, the women's basketball coach at SUNY Geneseo. Chad Dickman, men's coach at Hood. Eric Bridgeland, the number 2 Whitman head coach for the men's basketball. And, of course, Alex Richard, former Stevens Point men's basketball player. Appreciate him taking the time. Though I'm not sure how much we may have learned or didn't learn from Mr. Richard, but I appreciate him taking the time to come on and at least discuss it. Again, if you got questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Hoopsville. Follow us on Instagram at D3Hoopsville there as well. We'll be back on the air Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time. Remember, now that we're back into the January or rest of the season mode, we will be talking Northeast, Atlantic, South, and Central regions primarily on Sunday night while we talk. And we'll also welcome back the first WBCA segment of the new year. Looking forward to the WBCA Center Court making its first appearance. Of course, next Thursday, we'll primarily talk East, Mid-Atlantic, Great Lakes, and West with a little bit of South sometimes sprinkled in. And we'll welcome back the NABC Coaches Corner as well. That's going to do it for us. Again, we will stay on top of the Stevens Point information. And when we learn more, follow us on Twitter at D3Hoops and at D3Hoopsville. And for more information along those lines, we await the NCAA investigation as well. We simply do not know when that is going to come out. We'll try and do some digging ourselves to see if we learn more. That will do it. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. It's been a long show, and we must go. Hope you enjoyed it. If you watched it on demand, if you watched it live on Facebook or on YouTube, thank you for tuning in. If you had a chance to listen to it on demand, let us know. Send us an email on the mailbag. Hoopsville at d3hoops.com. I hope you download the podcast. If you don't know about it, download it from SoundCloud or iTunes and let us know about it as well. I want to say a special thank you to Sam Atkinson with the idea of putting the mailbag on our show. We appreciate his time. We'll begin to catch up with his program in the near future. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you have a good evening. Certainly fascinating story with Stevens Point. We'll stay on top of that, but thank you to our other guests as well. Good night. You've been listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA and ABC studios. Back with more Hoopsville on Sunday evening. Good night, everybody.